at the end of time.
O'clock.
Well, hey everybody, what's going on? It's Wednesday night. Now, DJ Maniac, you're making me very nervous because you're saying, like, hey, this isn't Movie Time Live. Please tell me I did not put the wrong fucking thumbnail up. I mean, I'm pretty sure I didn't because I thought I threw the old thumbnails away. And I'm pretty sure that I put the right thumbnail there.
It looked like a, let me go back and see.
Yeah, go, you can see it.
Man in the Iron Mask.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
Now I'm, like, doubting myself.
No.
You're gaslighting me. I'm just kidding. No, I don't know why he said that. Because it's Wednesday, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
DJ Maniac said, Man in the Iron Mask is a book and a film. Yes, they've made, well, I mean, yeah, there's been a lot of books about it. They made several films about it. But it was actually based on a real dude. And it's, like, really an interesting story. This was actually one of my favorite historical mysteries growing up. I first read about it in that, it was that big Reader's Digest book, Strange Stories, Amazing Facts. I'm sure probably some of y'all had it as well, like back in the 70s. And the thing about it is that a lot of the story, and if you see like the movie, because there was a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio, I think that's the one that most people are familiar with. And that one was based on the fictional story. There are threads of it that are real, but it's like a lot of it is exaggerated.
Yeah, Man in the Iron Mask was a real.
He was
thing.
a real guy.
Yeah, they just don't know who it was.
And they still don't.
Yeah.
Because I had been like, you know, reading about it, like I said, when I was a kid, but I hadn't until we started doing the show. We were going to do the show and like started researching it. Then I was like, oh, this will be neat because I'll get to go back and like see if any new shit has come out about it. Now, the most modern thing that has come out about it was somebody came out with a book in 2016 with a new theory, which actually kind of sounds pretty plausible. But I'm going to say this mystery, it confounds me still. I can see why it hasn't been solved in all this time.
Yeah, it started some nobleman saw them loading some dude. He came out of a fancy carriage and they loaded him into one of the prisons. It wasn't the Bastille, I don't think, was it?
Yeah,
Bastille?
he was in several prisons.
Yeah.
Before that, but the Bastille was the last one he was in. He actually died there.
Saw him loading in there. He was, dressed pretty well. And he came out of a carriage and they had a mask on his face so nobody could see who he was. But he was a prisoner. They were moving around in their system and nobody knows who he was. He was
they still
rich.
don't.
Somebody
Well,
rich and powerful.
maybe not.
Maybe not.
Which is one thing that we're going to get into. That is kind of the most popular conception. And
the
there
mask,
are reasons to think that. But
and the mask, I don't think was ever mentioned as being iron.
It's not.
It was just a mask.
It was actually black velvet is what it was made of.
Okay.
At least according to the official records, which they did find some of. They did find, like, I think it was in the 19th century because, obviously when the Bastille was stormed, a lot of the records there were destroyed, but a lot of them were, salvaged and were put in the, National Library later on. And they did actually find letters between the Man in the Mask's jailer and like other people. So they do actually have an official record. So this was a real guy. Like, it wasn't just like a story that was made up. But I think that the thing about it, the first mention of him like in fictional form was by Voltaire, and he actually exaggerated it a little bit, but it was based on a real person.
Yeah.
And like I said, and it was somebody that they still don't know. And like I said, I don't know if I have a preferred theory about this one because there's good reasons for thinking both things, that he was like maybe some member of the royal family or something like that, or just some like random schmo.
I don't think he was.
Or, well, like I said, there's good reasons for thinking both of those things, which we'll get into. And it's like, so I don't really know where I fall on it.
It's been a long time I've read anything about this that came from like witnesses, and I only remember one, or somebody quoting a witness that saw him.
Right.
Which that's hearsay. It's not fucking admissible in court, but I think he was some kind of nobleman. He was some kind of a rich nobleman, or the child of like the son of a rich nobleman, or possibly like French aristocracy, definitely, maybe royal family. And they had to incarcerate him for some reason. He committed some kind of crime, but they allowed him to cover up his face and be anonymous.
Nobody knows what the crime he committed was either,
Yeah.
which is also fascinating. Not only not knowing who the dude was,
Yeah.
but they don't know what he did.
Something serious.
I
think it was some kind of sex crime. That's what I'm thinking.
I'm not really
he was
sure. Like I said, I'll get into, because they do have contemporary letters from his jailer, who was actually with him the entire time he was incarcerated.
Okay, I don't know about
like going from place to place.
Yeah.
And it seems that he was more. It was more like a case of somebody that knew too much, like knew shit that they shouldn't know. And for whatever reason, they didn't want to kill this person. But they didn't want him to ever get out or like really talk to anybody either.
I think I remember that theory too.
Which is
that he knew too much about something, and so they had to kind of hide him.
Right. But yeah, I mean, well, this is like fascinating. I've been I've watched a bunch of documentaries about it. Now, okay, there's one documentary about it that's on YouTube, and it's on like a couple different channels put it up, and I guess it's it's clearly British because like the host is British and stuff. And I will say I was listening to it like on my drive home yesterday, and it is unadulterated bullshit. Like every bit of it. Well, not every bit of it. Like some of the stuff in it is true, but it's very, very sensationalistic. And they don't even mention the fact, I mean, they make it like this big deal, like, oh my God, it really was an iron mask, and it was like bolted to his head. Yeah. And it's like in this museum, they have this mask, and it's supposedly his, even though somebody just found it at a flea market somewhere. And it's just, I'm like, are you guys fucking serious right now? I was like, all the letters say that it wasn't an iron mask, it was a black velvet mask.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, so
better, though.
I know. Well, that's what I mean, and that's that's Voltaire's fault. Like he and he probably had his own motives for exaggerating it, or I don't know if he exaggerated it on purpose or if he just thought maybe that's how he heard it. Yeah. So it might not be his fault entirely, but I mean, it's his fault that the iron mask thing like took off.
It sounds a lot better if it's an iron mask.
It does, yeah. But I mean, the thing, if you think about it though, from a physiological standpoint, it's just kind of like nobody is gonna, because this dude was imprisoned for 34 years, like in essentially solitary confinement. Like he was allowed to like see his jailer, and maybe sometimes talk to other prisoners, but not usually. Like he was usually kind of kept in isolation. So it's like 34 years, like having an iron mask like bolted to your, it's like you would die. Like it just wouldn't. And especially the masks like they have in the in the artistic renditions of it and stuff like that.
It'd get rotten as hell. And
and like
skin would get gangrene.
Yeah, one guy pointed that out. He's like, you would just have like fucking bacteria under there and your skin would rot off.
Yeah, you wouldn't live long with that.
No, that's what they were saying. So it was like, there's just no way. It's like, it sounds cool and romantic and like, oh my God, what a torture and everything like that. But it's like, it wasn't that. It wasn't. He didn't wear an iron mask bolted to his head for 34 years.
Yeah, I didn't know that was the claim. Yeah. I thought they just had the mask on him when they transported him.
Yeah.
And then they took it back off when they got him into a cell. That's what I thought. But no, you couldn't live 34 years
with absolutely
an iron cage on your head like that.
No.
It would lead to complications over time. You'd probably last a couple years, but...
Maybe, but not 34 years, which was how long he was in prison. Ben said he might have had an iron mask for formal occasions before the felt when he was slumming around his dungeon. Maybe so. At least, well, honestly, I'm going to say, and this might be a little bit of a spoiler alert for a hundreds of year old story, but the consensus, or what the most historians think, like just from reading the letters, like from the contemporary letters from like the jailer and stuff, the implication is that not only was the mask velvet, but he also didn't wear it all the time. Just like he only wore it when they were moving him, or like when he went to church services or something like that. They didn't like, so he wasn't wearing it 24/7. You know what I mean? But like I said, Tammy said, the man in the black velvet mask just doesn't have the same ring to it. Yeah, it definitely doesn't. It doesn't have that kind of like medieval torture kind of vibe, which I think everyone was kind of into. Yeah, and him
just putting it on when they fucking transported him or sent him somewhere, that's not very... That wouldn't sell books either. Yeah. But they wanted his identity. He either wanted his identity masked, or they were ordered to do that to him. They were trying to race him, probably. They didn't want people to know who he was. My theory is that he was a rich guy who probably sexually assaulted somebody's daughter, and they didn't want it out, you know, that happened to her, and they just hushed it up and they locked him away. That was the feeling I had.
I mean,
I don't know everything that you know. You found more stuff.
Yeah. I mean, ironically, the fact that the dude was in a mask made everybody, like, super more curious about it, because they're like, well, who the fuck is this motherfucker? Because it was, like, unusual. Even at the time, people were talking about, like, well, the dude was still alive.
Yeah.
Like, it was all kind of rumors about who it could be, because every time they transferred him, it was like, why does he have a mask on? Who the fuck is that?
My take on it is that he was trying to, that they were trying to protect his family's honor.
Yeah, it could have been that.
And the chances are, you know what I mean, if you were kind of a minor nobility, they wouldn't care about your fucking honor. Everybody know that your kid's in prison. So I would think this guy was upper crust, and he fucking did something to somebody else who was upper crust, and they kind of just took care of it and put it on the down low and hushed it up. He didn't have a formal trial. I don't think, you know, they just
no, not that I know.
You're going to spend the rest.
Well, they didn't in this time period. In France, which was one of the points of contention for the French Revolution, was they had something called, what was it called? Letters de cachet or something like that. Where basically if the king, you said something that pissed the king off, they could just have you picked up and, like, tossed in a dungeon.
Yeah.
For as long as you didn't have to have a trial or nothing. They
No.
were just kind of like, yeah, we didn't like what you. Well,
Yeah.
Voltaire had that shit happen. He was only in there for 11 months.
But
he said some shit that, like, the king didn't like, and he's just like, into the Bastille with you, buddy.
Most of human history's been like that. Most countries today are run kind of like that. Central South America, even in Asian countries, you can make somebody mad if he's rich and important. You're gonna get locked up. They'll make some kind of charge.
What's kind of interesting about this, the reason that I don't know if I have a theory about it, is that I'm not entirely sure if the man in the mask was royalty or something like that. But then on the other hand, if he was just some servant or something like that who knew too much, you'd think they would have just killed him.
Just killed him, yeah.
Because it's like, why would they keep him alive?
And
Like, he was of a lower class, and it's like, back then, if you were royalty, you could just kill people with impunity. They didn't give a shit.
It was if he was a minor noble who had committed a crime against another minor noble, they'd force him to fucking go in there with everybody, you know, because that happened before. You know?
Yeah.
So no, you went to prison like everybody else, and everybody knew what you did. This was somebody where maybe this is something extreme.
It had
Like,
to be
maybe-
something extraordinary,
Yeah.
because they didn't really treat other people like
Right.
this.
This was something where they're protecting his family and the victim's family because they might have been the same family. You know what I mean? Like, what if this dude, say, raped a duchess, and he was her cousin or something like that?
Right.
You didn't want that out in the public. You know what I mean? That dude raped his own cousin, and they were both from a noble family. You know, that would bring shame on the family. I think it was something like that.
But like I said,
So
we'll
they
get
said-
into it, because there's really kind of intriguing evidence for both sides,
Okay.
and I'm not really sure where I fall on it.
All right. I would just imagine that was the solution. It was where the perpetrator's family and the victim's family were the same family. So in other words, maybe he did something to a family member,
Right.
and they didn't want it out. Okay, that happened in that family, make the family look bad. No trial or anything. They know he did it. You know, whoever the victim was fucking said what he did, and so they just go, okay, we're gonna vanish you. Don't let anybody know. You're gonna live in shame. Don't take that mask off in public. You know, you'll bring shame to your own family. It was something like that, I think. And you know, dude fucking raped a relative, something like that.
Well, like I said, I'll get into it, because I found out all kind of stuff.
Okay.
Because like I said, I don't know if a lot of people know this, because a lot of people know the story, like, from the movies or, you know, maybe from the books and stuff like that. But I don't know if a lot because I didn't know, and I was kind of interested in this when I was a kid.
French were pretty.
But
Go ahead.
you know, there were a lot of documents that came out later on that had letters to the jailers and stuff like that that gave a lot of clues about who this dude might have been.
The French were pretty permissive. If he had sex without a wedlock or something, they wouldn't give a shit about that. You could probably even nail one of the king's daughters, and as long as she was consensual and she never complained, you probably they wouldn't give a shit. They were kind of doing the royal family was kind of doing fucking free love anyway. You know, they didn't expect. I don't think they were even expecting women to be. I don't think they expected women to be virgins when they married, if they were in the royal class. I think that was just mostly for middle class people.
Well, it's always kind of like that, isn't it? Rules for the little.
Yeah, the rich people didn't play that. They do whatever they wanted.
Yeah, Ben said letters to cachet were like open arrest warrants you could get for your relatives or people you didn't like. Yeah, exactly. De Sade was confined with one by an aunt after he was accused of killing a maid. Yeah, that's right. We did a show on Marquis de Sade like a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, High Desert said he was probably royalty, which is why they didn't just off him.
Yeah.
They couldn't have a trial for royalty to make all royalty look bad. And then Ben said you couldn't have a trial for royalty full stop. They were above the law.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially in this era.
That's what I think it was.
Because, I mean, Louis XIV was essentially a tyrant.
Yeah.
And, you know, he just basically spent all the money and, like, everyone in the countryside was starving. And he's just like, don't care. Yeah. It was just that kind of situation.
When they were disconnected, they thought the peasants were happy.
He did, yeah. They did.
The people that run countries, even this one and shit, they don't know what regular people live like. They're yes men that surround them, tell them they're doing a great job. Everybody loves you. That's just what they do. The military is like that too, especially at the Pentagon. Bunch of fucking suck ass generals. They're just civilians in military suits, and they have no idea what the fuck's going on, which is very surprising. But ex generals will get out and they'll say that. If they're not on somebody else's payroll, they go, "Oh yeah, those guys are ate up."
Ben says it could be similar to the Caspar Hauser case, which I've been wanting to do a show about for like ages, but it never wins in the poll. God damn it! They believed if they killed the prisoner, he would be reincarnated into a new body. Yeah, maybe. 102's Velasquez, hello. Good evening. What is today's topic? We are talking about the historical mystery, the Man in the Iron Mask. That's what we're talking about. Before we do that, I know because you guys know we're in Florida. And yeah, we just had that little hurricane situation, Hurricane Idalia or whatever you call it. Is it like Idalia, like Vidalia, like the onion? Luckily for us, it went a little more north and west than they were expecting. So we didn't lose power. I went to work today. They started texting us last night and said, if it gets really bad, like don't come in, if you don't think you can drive like in that shit and everything like that. But when I woke up this morning, it really didn't look like any. It was a little bit windy. That was about it. The nice thing was that a lot of people did stay home and took a hurricane day, so the traffic was very, very light, which was pretty cool. Like going to work and coming from work in the afternoon, I'm like, woo, where is everybody? This is like pretty awesome. Because everybody was like, even if the hurricane doesn't hit, we're staying home. Fuck it. It's the middle of the week. Yeah, but we didn't have, like I said, it was windy, and like Tom said, it didn't rain here. I ran into some rain when I was driving to Daytona, but other than that, it was like nothing. I mean, I've driven through many, many times worse than that just on a regular Sunday or regular summer afternoon thunderstorm, so it was okay. But it was good for us. Like, I'm sure that where the eye hit looked like it was going to be pretty fucked up, so that's bad, but we didn't get hardly any of it, luckily. So it went like pretty far away. So there's that. All right. So do you want to like get a little bit into this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Are you ready? Let's do it. All right. So like I said, I've been researching this for several days and watching a bunch of documentaries. But like I said, the British documentary that's on YouTube, that one is that's a bunch of crap. Like a lot of stuff they said in there was just not very substantive, and it was really, really sensationalistic. And they didn't even like point out the fact that the mask was not iron. They even had this whole sequence where the dude went to like this blacksmith, like this famous blacksmith, and they made an iron mask like to have the host put on, be like, oh my god, it'd be horrible to like wear this for 34 years. And I'm like, he didn't wear that for 34 years. Like, stop it. And then like they didn't even mention that. So, it was just kind of like very silly. So I was like, well, that was kind of a waste of time. But there are some other good ones on there that are actually more factual. But like I said, nobody really knows who this dude is, and everybody has a theory. And honestly, like a lot of the theories sound fairly plausible, like on their face. So we'll get into it. So, like I said, if you don't know, Man in the Iron Mask, still unidentified prisoner during the reign of King Louis XIV. Now, he was actually arrested in July of 1669, and he was brought to the first of 4 prisons that he would go to throughout his life under a pseudonym, or maybe it's a pseudonym, they're not entirely sure, Eustache Dauger. That was the name that he was brought in under. So he was actually jailed on August 24th, and over the ensuing 34 years, he would go to 4 different prisons around France, always under the care of the same jailer, whose name was Benin Dauvergne de Saint-Mars. And please, like, forgive me in advance for my terrible French pronunciation. I did take French for 4 years in school, but I'm sure I'm going to butcher the fucking language, so I'm just telling you right now.
Fuck French. Fuck French.
Why?
Fuck French.
Oh, you're so edgy, Tom.
Yeah. I speak Portuguese. You don't need French.
But yeah. So yeah. Ben says, what you have to remember with all these accounts is there was extreme hostility in the press towards the state, and all sorts of stories were published which were total fantasy or wildly inaccurate. And I kind of feel like that maybe, and I'm not blaming Voltaire here because he actually had a legit beef, but yeah, he was not a big fan of the monarchy or Louis XIV in particular. And so it could be that he used the story of the Man in the Iron Mask and exaggerated it in particular ways so it would seem more like torture, like, look at what they did to this poor guy, you know what I mean? So he did write it as fiction, but most of his stuff that was fiction was based on real shit, you know what I mean? So there was that. But I do kind of feel like he had ulterior motives also, even though, like I said, his ulterior motives were probably pretty pure. Now, they don't know, like I said, a huge amount about, they do know the name that he was brought in under. They do know the date that he was brought there because there were letters, like, going back and forth. Because basically, you know, there was a letter that came in and said, hey, this prisoner is coming here, like, in a month, so get ready for them because we need all of these weird accommodations, which we'll get into in a second. So, as I said, all these letters that came out about it, that came out in the 19th century, and they found a bunch of letters between Saint-Mars, who was his jailer for 34 years, and that guy's, like, bosses, you know what I mean? Now, in these letters, which is something that I don't think that I don't think was in the account that I read of it when I was a kid, because, like I said, they were trying to make it seem like spookier and more fantastical or whatever. But in these letters, basically they said the prisoner was quote unquote only a valet. They actually say that in the letters, and the implication from the letters seems to be that he was being jailed because of stuff that he saw and knew and what he was employed to do, quote unquote. That was what they were imprisoning him for. So as I said, you know, the legend was that nobody ever saw his face, which seems to be an exaggeration. The mask was actually black velvet and not iron. And according to the implications from the letters that they still have, it seems that he was only wearing the mask like when he was being transferred, because most of the time when he was in the prison, he was in the cell by himself, and usually only Saint-Mars or his second in command would see him, and they would only see him once a day.
They're trying to hide him from prisoners.
Yeah, maybe.
And the public.
Maybe.
Yeah. Maybe, like you said, maybe select staff. Only they were allowed to see him. But yeah, I got my own opinions. I said, I already gave my version of it. I don't think it was any intrigue involved in it. I think it was just family honor. That's what I think. I think he was a criminal.
But yeah, so the story, like I said, Voltaire was the first one to write about him. But probably the story became even more popular in 1850 when Alexandre Dumas wrote about him. He wrote a novel called The Viscount of Bragelonne.
Alexandre Dumas?
Yeah, Dumas, yeah.
The same guy who did Count of Monte Cristo?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was an interesting guy. A lot of people don't know that he was black. He was a black Frenchman. Badass book, too, man. Fucking Count of Monte Cristo is the ultimate fucking prison story. Great book. And prison vengeance.
But he actually wrote about this guy in this novel, which was actually the last installment of his D'Artagnan books. And an interesting thing too, and maybe we should do a show about the Three Musketeers, because the Three Musketeers, or actually the Four Musketeers, I guess, were also all based on real people. So yeah, and there is kind of like some crossover with the Man in the Iron Mask as well. And I think the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, which I haven't seen in a long time, but that has Three Musketeers and Man in the Iron Mask kind of interacting, which kind of, it's not really all that accurate, because I think three of the guys that the Musketeers were actually based on were either dead or weren't Musketeers anymore by the time that the Man in the Iron Mask was like arrested, or by the time all that went on. Mm-hmm. But they finagled the timeline a little bit, but they were like based on real guys, just like this guy was. So yeah. So the thing about it, not an iron mask, because nobody could survive for 34 years with an iron mask bolted to their face, obviously, because their face would rot off. Also, I wanted to note too, which we'll get into a little bit later, the thing about it, and they say this a lot in a lot of documentaries, that they're like, well, we can't think of any other reason why they would make this guy wear a mask all the time, other than he must have been someone who was instantly recognizable to everybody.
I would think so.
And they argue that it's like, well, the only person, I mean, this was the 1600s. They didn't have photography or TV or nothing like that. So it's like the only person that would have been instantly recognizable to everybody would have been the king, because his face was on all the money. So that's where the whole, which is probably one of the very popular theories, that the man in the velvet mask, the man in the iron mask, was actually either a twin brother of Louis XIV or an illegitimate half-brother, and that he bore enough resemblance to him where it would have been like kind of a big deal.
The half-brother idea kind of sounds plausible.
Yeah, we'll get into that like when we kind of talk about, because I kind of want to talk about like what happened exactly, and then we'll talk about like all the different candidates that people have like talked about who maybe it is. But here's the thing, though. On the other hand, like, yeah, that totally makes sense. Like, why, like, if it was just some schlub, like, why would you have to wear a mask? Like, who the fuck would recognize just some valet? You know what I mean? But then on the other hand, there's some shit that came out that was in a lot of those letters where the dude actually worked as a servant for one of the other prisoners who was aristocracy. And if the Man in the Iron Mask had been royalty or aristocracy, they would never have allowed that to happen. So there's, like I said, there's kind of like evidence for both sides. You know what I'm saying? And so it's just, that's why it's so mysterious, and that's why nobody can figure it out, because who the fuck was this dude? And why did they go through, because they went through some like pretty stringent protocols to keep anybody from finding out who this was. They had all kind of like shit that they had to like prepare and stuff.
It might be that story's false, that he wasn't anybody's servant in there.
Well, that was in all the official records, though. That was in the letters from his jailer, like to the bosses and stuff.
Yeah, I don't know if they would let a member of the royal family.
That's what they're saying. It's like they don't think they would.
Unless he'd been stripped of his titles or something.
Maybe.
Totally stripped and disowned. Maybe they would then. But then they'd spare his life and then keep his face covered so no one wouldn't bring disgrace on his family. Maybe. I don't know.
Ben said maybe his face was burned with acid. Or maybe he was really deformed like Phantom of the Opera. Some people have pointed out, it's like, yeah, maybe he was real fucked up looking. But I was just kind of like, I don't know. Like, no, I feel like if he was really fucked up looking and he was a commoner, they would have just killed him.
They'd make him walk around, they'd mock him, laugh at him.
Right. So it's like, so I don't really buy that necessarily. But see, that's what I mean. But I don't really know like what the reason is.
He was important. He was famous. And they were trying to hide his identity to protect his family. Yeah, that's the only explanation. Sorry, just no. They're protecting his family, and he's helping to protect his own family, and he's in shame. I think he's a sex criminal. That's what I thought.
Man, my ice melted already.
Okay,
yeah, I'm getting some more ice. All right. So the first records that they have of this dude come from July 19th, 1669. And this is a letter that still survives. And it is from the Marquis de Louvois, who was Louis XIV's minister. And this guy sent a letter to Saint Mars, who was going to be the dude's jailer. And at that time, he was the governor of a prison at Pignerol, which I think it's not part of France anymore. I don't believe it's in the Alps, if I'm not mistaken. But it was a part of the French, empire at this time. So this letter says, this prisoner is going to be there in like a month or so you need to get ready for him. And in this letter, he specifically identifies the prisoner as Eustache Dauger. Like I said, historically, this has been seen as a pseudonym, but there is a theory that thinks that maybe this isn't a pseudonym, but we'll get into that a little bit later. But that's what the name that they gave. This is the prisoner that's coming, and that's his name. So in this letter, he also tells Saint Mars, he's like, here's what you need to do. You need to prepare a cell that has multiple doors that like close one in on the other. So there's like a whole bunch of them like that. It's like we don't want anybody being able to like listen to anything he says or any kind of conversation going around or anything like that. We don't want anybody to be able to like spy on him or him to be able to talk to anybody outside. So there was that thing. He also said you may only interact with this prisoner once a day to bring him food and ask him for anything that he needs. He also says, if this prisoner, Dauger, if he asks you for anything, if he talks about anything other than just what he immediately needs, he is to be killed immediately. That was another
Is it official?
That was in the letter.
Yeah.
This is the first letter that they know that has this, that is about this guy. Because he's saying, he's coming there in a month. This is what you need to do before he gets there. He says he shouldn't cause you too much trouble because, and he shouldn't need too much stuff because he is, quote unquote, only a valet. That's what he says in the letter. Now, interestingly, and right here is where kind of a lot of the rumors about the guy started, because already there's kind of like a weird conspiratorial thing going on about this guy's arrest. So this dude was allegedly arrested by this garrison commander of Dunkirk, whose name was Captain Alexandre du Vauroy. Now, he was supposedly arrested on July 28th and then taken to the prison where, like I said, he got there on August 24th. Now, here's the weird thing. They think, though, just from evidence that they have uncovered, that the arrest actually took place in Calais, but that they had, the guy that made the arrest, they actually said that he was somewhere else, like it was like a covert operation. You know what I'm saying? Like to pick this dude up. Because they had to like come up with this cover story over where this garrison commander was someplace else instead of in Calais arresting this guy. And then they said that they didn't even tell the governor or whatever of Calais that they were coming in to pick up this dude. So it was like supposedly this secret mission. Okay, that's kind of what the evidence says. And right around this time, when news about that started leaking out, that's when the first rumors about who this dude might be kind of started circulating a little bit. They didn't get like really big until later on, like when the whole mask thing came about. But this was when the first rumors, because they're like, well, who the fuck is this guy that they had to go through all this like subterfuge, you know what I mean? So there was that. Now, the prison that he was sent to at Pignerol, just like many of the other prisons that he would subsequently be held at, like I said, it was 4 prisons over the course of 34 years. This was specifically a prison for people who were considered, quote unquote, an embarrassment to the state. And these prisons usually only had a couple of prisoners at a time. You know, it wasn't like a big prison with a whole bunch of people in it. It was usually like, 4 dudes or something like that. So it was that. They were kind of like political prisoners or things of that nature. Now, when they brought Dauger, the man in the mask, to Pignerol, the other prisoners there were a guy named Count Ercole Antonio Mattioli, who was an Italian diplomat. Now, he had actually double-crossed the French over this whole... There was supposedly like this land deal where he was supposed to purchase this fortress town on the Italian border, and then he had like double-crossed the French like by telling the other foreign powers about it and like fucked him out of the deal. So they were mad, so they put him in there. There was also a guy named Nicolas Fouquet, who was a marquis, and he, Louis XIV had thrown him in jail for embezzlement because he was a superintendent of finances and he had embezzled a bunch of money, so they threw him in there. And then the other guy, so like I said, there's only 4 dudes at this place. The other guy was another Marquis de, oh my god, Lauzun. He actually, and this seems kind of lame nowadays, but he actually got engaged to one of the king's cousins, a duchess, without permission. So, and you know, and the king got mad and threw him in there too. So that's the kind of prisoners that were at the place where he was taken. Now, in these letters that they still have, Saint-Mars, who is the jailer, he actually says that Dauger is not he's very quiet. He doesn't give him any trouble or anything like that. He's like the other motherfuckers, and he doesn't say it like this, but he's like the other motherfuckers in here. It's like they're always bitching and moaning, and it's like they're always trying to escape, and there's like all this other kind of shit. You know, so they're a pain in my ass. But it's like this guy seems like he just does what he's told, and he keeps his mouth shut and everything like that. So he's like a model prisoner, and he seemed like real devoted to God, real religious, all this other kind of stuff. So he's like, yeah, he's great. Now, even though Dauger was not really supposed to interact all that much with people, but he was permitted to interact a little bit with the other prisoners. And this is something, like I said, that I just discovered when I was researching this recently, and that I had never heard anybody talking about before, like in old accounts of this story. So, as I mentioned before, if you were a prisoner who was of the aristocracy, like they'd still throw your ass in jail, but you were still allowed to have servants. So one of the other prisoners that was in jail with the man in the mask was Nicolas Fouquet, as I mentioned. Now, he had a servant named La Rivière. Now, it was kind of hard to find good help because obviously the dude's in jail, so it's like your servant is also in jail. You know what I mean? So it's like it's kind of hard to be like, it doesn't really sound like a good employment prospect. No thanks. But Nicolas Fouquet did have a servant when he was in the jail named La Rivière. But La Rivière was kind of a sickly dude, and so he was kind of like in and out all the time. So Saint-Mars actually wrote a letter to his superiors asking if it would be okay when La Rivière was indisposed if the man in the mask, Dauger, could act as Fouquet's servant, his manservant. So like I said, this is another reason why they think maybe he wasn't aristocracy or royalty or anything like that, because that would have been highly unusual for someone of the aristocracy or something like that to be allowed to be someone else's servant. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it could also be a cover story.
It could. I mean, it very possibly could be.
They don't want you to know who this is, and they say, oh, and he's not royal. No.
It could have been, yeah.
He's just a valet. Matter of fact, he's going to be this other dude's servant. That's probably what's going on there. Because, look, man, basically all the monarchs, all of them throughout their whole history, if you were just a regular person and you were an embarrassment, even if you were innocent, they'd kill you. They'd kill you. They wouldn't go through all this trouble for some valet.
See, that's kind of what I'm thinking. It's like, even though it's like he had to be somebody kind of important, or somebody that had some information that they needed, because otherwise they would have just killed him.
He was an embarrassment to him, and he wasn't a fucking regular dude that they could kill. He was somebody. He was a noble or somebody in the royal family. It's the only explanation. If he was a valet that knew something that he wasn't supposed to know, or a servant that overheard something, they'd fucking kill him. They wouldn't care if he was an innocent man. They didn't think that way.
Well, and like I said, it was very, I mean, especially in this time period, it would have been very, like, you know, the aristocracy, they could basically, they had carte blanche. They could do whatever they wanted. Right. And if you were just some lowly servant or something like that, and you just pissed them off, they'd just be like, oh, too bad.
Or if you were just a threat to their honor.
Right.
Oh, well, he saw my wife cheating on me. Kill him. That was like that.
And everybody'd be like, okay, can do.
Yeah. Kill all the witnesses.
Yeah.
All the servants and shit. They'll gossip, and the word will get out. They were fucking assholes. They were like the mafia. Probably worse than the mafia, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they had carte blanche. They didn't have to hide what they did.
Yeah, because everybody's like, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
You couldn't do anything.
So I don't buy any of this.
Well, I'm just saying
it's a good story.
That this is what the letters say.
It's a good story. Yeah, I'm sure the letter says that. I think that's the cover story. The regime sent him there under a cover story. That's why they got a mask on him. if he was just a valet, now they wouldn't even mask him. You know what I mean?
Right.
They got him masked, and then they give him an alias, a fake name, and a fake identity. And they're not going to say, well, he's a royal guy, by the way, though. You got to treat him royal. They're not going to do that.
Yeah. So the letters that they have say that in 1675, Louvois, who was the minister, he said, yeah, that's fine. You can do that whole arrangement. He said, but the only way you can do that, the man in the mask can be Fouquet's servant. However, if Fouquet is talking to one of the other prisoners, he's not allowed to be there. You know what I mean? And they think that is because Fouquet was not ever expected to get out of prison. So they didn't really care if he associated with the man in the mask.
Yeah, he died.
However, the one of the other prisoners, Lauzun, he was expected to get out. So it's like, well, we don't want anything, we don't want him finding out like who this dude is or anything like that, and then he gets out and blabs.
Right.
So they tried to like keep him separate, but they didn't really care as much with Fouquet because Fouquet was not expected to get out of prison. So that's kind of what it was. However, one thing that they did find out after Fouquet died, which was in 1680, was that Fouquet and Lauzun had actually been communicating they had dug like holes like between their cells and were talking, and the guards didn't know about that. So at that point, they had to like come up with some kind of story because they're like, well, shit, now Lauzun gets out, and it's like, it's possible that Fouquet had told him about who the dude in the mask was, and it's like, now if he gets out and he's gonna blab, so then they had to tell Lauzun, like they had to come up with this story. It's like, oh well, him and La Rivière, who was Fouquet's original servant, they got let out. We don't know what happened to them or anything like that. So it was just like this whole fucking deal. But they were trying to like isolate him from the other prisoners because they didn't want anybody finding out who he was. You know what I'm saying?
Badass Harley that went by.
Yeah, I heard that.
Yeah.
So
okay, I hear you, bro.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
they're so loud.
Yeah.
I mean, you would think that you'd be able to hear it like this far up in the house,
and
but
it's always like a fat northerner in a Hawaiian shirt with
it's
fucking
like
flip flops.
It's so loud, like in this fucking room.
Yeah.
Because this office is like on the front side of the house, so it's like we have a long driveway, but then like the road is like right there, and everybody's just like, "Woo, listen to me," and I'm just like, "Man, no thanks."
Yeah, it's a rich boy scooter here.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
So Lauzun got out in 1681, and in the same year as that, Saint-Mars got sent to another prison. The Exil is, I think, how you pronounce it. So he went there to take his new job and took the man in the mask with him. He took La Rivière with him as well, who was Fouquet's servant, because Fouquet, I think, had died by this point. Now, La Rivière actually died a few years after that, in 1687, and then later that year, Saint-Mars moved to another prison, Sainte-Marguerite, and again, he took the man in the mask with him. Like I said, every time he moved to another prison, he always took this prisoner with him. This was his personal prisoner. Sainte-Marguerite is actually, it's this kind of fortress, it's still there, it's like a tourist attraction, and it's about, I think it's only like a half a mile over the water from Caen, so you can see the city from, it didn't look like it looks now, obviously, like back then, but you can see it from there. And if you go there, and this was on the documentary, they did show this, but you can still go in the man in the mask's cell, like where he stayed, and I think he was there for 11 years in that particular cell. And it's bigger than you would think. Like, it's not super luxurious or nothing like that, but I mean, it's, at least according to this documentary, and I hesitate to give it too much credence because they said a lot of bullshit that obviously wasn't true. But they did say, well, this wasn't like a prison where they put it. It was actually like a military garrison. But they're like, the cell where they put him was actually probably would have been a little bit nicer than the soldiers' quarters. So it wasn't like they tossed him in a hole, you know?
Goes back to what that goes back in
like
favor.
It wasn't fancy, but it wasn't.
Yeah, that goes back in favor of what I'm saying. He's nobility, aristocracy, or royal family or something.
Because another thing that they said on this documentary was that, when they stormed the Bastille, they went down to this like little fucking hole of a dungeon, like in the basement or whatever, and they found a skeleton chained to the wall that had an iron mask on it. And I'm like, that is 100% pure unadulterated bullshit.
Yeah.
That's bullshit.
Skeletons don't hold together.
Well, and the thing, two, he wasn't chained to a wall. 3, he didn't wear an iron mask, and 3, they buried him. Yeah. They didn't leave him in there. You know what I mean? Because he died like way before the storming of the Bastille. Anyway,
the more information you're giving me, the more I think I was right. I think I'm right more or less so far. We're just gonna see, because it's all clicking in. This whole alias thing, and he's just a valet. That's a cover story. He's important, especially if they're incarcerating him in such a nice facility. And really, relatively nice for the time. And really, what it is they just don't want him talking to people. They don't want people to know who he is. He's basically going through the private prison situation. They didn't have house arrest back then, ankle bracelets and shit like that. Although I think some people did imprison their own relatives inside their own castles at certain times, but this is something different. They want him away from other nobles too.
That might be a reason to have a castle. It's like you have a whole other wing where you can put relatives you don't like.
Yeah, think of that, man. You're a fucking kind of lord or some
Chain Aunt Betsy over there in the other wing. She's getting on my nerves.
You're some kind of a duke or some shit like that, and you got a damn castle, your own private mercenaries, all these knights and shit. And you got your own prison in there. Imagine that. Motherfuckers had power. That might be throw you in his private prison to rot.
High Desert said, do they know where he's buried? Maybe they could dig him up and do a DNA test. Yeah. I was thinking that too.
Yeah, they could if he's there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, just from what I read, it sounded like they knew maybe roughly like where they put him, but I'm not entirely sure. You know what I mean? They know when he died. There's records of it.
If he's in the royal family, they got residue of all those royal families. They'll be able to pinpoint exactly who he is.
I wonder if they'll do that one of these days.
They should.
I mean, they should, because...
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Because this shit, like, the more I read about it, it's driving me fucking crazy. Who the fuck was this dude? But
I got a feeling he's royal family.
Yeah, I mean, maybe. Like I said...
minor player in the royal family.
Maybe.
And he committed a crime against another royal family member. They don't want anybody to know, because it was dishonorable. So
well, like I said, we'll get into all the...
Something like that.
All the, candidates, some of which are royals and some of which aren't, or some of which are kind of like aristocracy.
So you dug up some wild ass royals that were doing bad shit.
Well, not like you're saying, but there were other reasons.
Could have been political intrigue too.
I think that seemed like mostly the reason.
What year again? This is 1600s. They might have been doing like late 1600s, doing something with Canadians or something with fucking people down in Louisiana. They might have been fucking plotting against the king, but he's real closely related to the king, so they're not gonna kill him. And we don't want the peasants to know that people inside the royal family are plotting against the king, so we just got to make this guy disappear.
Well, like I said, it seemed like most of the reasons and most of the other guys that he was incarcerated with it was usually political shit, like embezzling from the royal family or plotting against the royal family or shit like that. It wasn't necessarily like sex scandals or anything like that. It was mostly like political shit.
Could be that. But then again, if it's just a guy you're trying to get rid of, all right, you're going to send him to the cushiest place because, especially if you're related to him, you're going to send him to a cush place to live out his life. And that might be that political prison. So they have to weasel his way in there with an undercover story. It's just many things. It could be a lot of shit.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. That's why they're still talking about.
Whoever arranged this had a heavy hand. It sounds like something the king would do.
Well, most of the people that were incarcerated in these types of prisons. Like I said, these were like political prisoners or embarrassments to the state or something like that. Usually for things like that, for offenses against the king, like stealing his money or shit like that.
Yeah.
So most of these people. So I don't know. It was usually at the behest of Louis XIV for sure.
Sounds about right.
Is how most of these people ended up there. So he goes to Sainte Marguerite, which, like I said, is still there. You can still visit it, and you can still see the cell where he was kept. And I believe he was there for 11 years, if I'm not mistaken. Now, it was right around this time that the rumors about the Iron Mask started, because, like I said, according to the letters, the implication from the letters was that he only wore a mask when he was being transferred, like when he was going to be out in public and like people were going to see him and stuff like that. So I think this was right around the time that the whole mask thing started and people were like flipping out about that, wondering who the fuck he was. The cell that he was in at Sainte Marguerite also had the multiple doors thing.
Like an airlock?
And I think, yeah, kind of.
That way you couldn't open the door and look directly in there.
Right. Yeah,
they had to open one door and shut it behind you and open the other one.
Yeah, I think is what they were talking
about.
I think is what they're talking about. Because that's what they had done at the first, at Pignerol, too, the first prison he was at. So they always kind of like... Now, see, the documentary, and like I said, the documentary where they went there and they showed the cell, they said that, well, this wasn't a prison, but a military garrison, and they had this cell specifically made for him. I don't know if that's the case or not. I don't know if they built that cell specifically for him or to his specifications. That seemed like what they were trying to get across, but I didn't read that anywhere else, so they could just be pulling that out of their ass. It could be that they had cells there or rooms there that could be made into cells, and they altered it, you know, to go along with the stipulations that it's like, you know, we don't want him seen or we want him to be isolated, so we need the doors and all that other kind of stuff. Because they did that at Pignerol too, where they had the extra doors put in. So I'm imagining maybe they just, you know, modified something they already had. The way the documentary made it sound, it's like, oh, well, they built it to the Man in the Mask specifications. And I'm like, I never read that anywhere else. So I don't know if they're just pulling that out of their butt. I don't know where they got that from. But,
it's an interesting case.
It is, yeah.
Wondering who this dude is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like I said, the more I read about this, the more I was just like, this is driving me crazy. They got to find out who this is, like, before I die. You know what I mean?
It's kind of like Jack the Ripper. Still don't know who that is.
That is another thing that drives me fucking crazy. And the shitty thing about it, and Jack the Ripper was like not even as long ago as this was.
Yeah.
So it's like now it's probably, and they're probably never gonna find out who Jack the Ripper was, because everybody comes at, like, every year somebody comes out with a book and says, oh, it was this person, it was that person, and it's like there's no way of proving it. You can't prove it.
But if you find this guy's body, you might be able to figure out who this is.
Yeah, this guy, they might be able to figure out who it is. I mean, yeah, it was a long time ago, but if they could find his bones and they still had some marrow in there, they could get some DNA off of. And if he was indeed a royal, then, like you said, yeah, there'd be like a genetic line they could look back into.
Those people, they got all kinds of
stuff.
Yeah,
they got all kinds of stuff. So if it was just some schlub, they'll never find out who it was. But if it was a royal family, yeah, they might actually like be able to figure that out. So yeah. So after that, you know, so he's at Sainte Marguerite for 11 years. Like I don't want to say he's like in total solitary confinement, but it was pretty isolated. Like, he wasn't really allowed to interact with anybody on a day-to-day basis. Like, Saint Mars would come once a day, bring him food, and be like, hey, is there anything you need? Okay, I'm out. And then he would just, like, be by himself, like, the rest of the time.
30 years in solitary
34 years.
He must have been fucking crazy as a loon.
You would think.
Oh, yeah.
Nobody ever, like, accused him of acting up. They said he was, like, pretty chill, but... I mean, at least in, like, the early days.
I'm sure he was fucking crazy as shit. Were they letting him read?
You know, I don't know. I imagine they were. I mean, I imagine they had to give him some stuff to, like, entertain himself with if he couldn't talk to anybody and shit. So, yeah, I would think they would have, like, given him books and stuff. Right. I think he had, like, at Sainte Marguerite, at least, I think he had, like, a little fireplace and stuff like that. And maybe he had, like, a little library. So, you know, I don't know. Because they said, like, the guy that was the curator at Sainte Marguerite, like, they talked to him on this documentary, and he said, well, he's like, this was furnished, but we don't know what the furniture looked like, you know what I mean? Like, because obviously it was a long time ago. But they did have, like, a little fireplace and a little, not like a toilet, because they didn't really have, but a toilet-ish kind of situation. So it's like, it wasn't, you know, it wasn't a pit, it wasn't a shithole.
Yeah. Like the Marquis was in. Marquis de Sade was in a fucking pit.
Yeah, pretty much.
Writing that porn.
They hated that dude.
Yeah. He was in prison writing porn and sneaking it out.
Yeah.
Sneaking it out, having it sold on the street.
Release my porn to the world.
Yeah, they have to have this smut. That's how he was making his money. People were contracting him to write smut.
I mean, you do have to admire his...
that was his grift when he was in prison.
Sure. That's what I mean. You have to, like, fucking...
He got released on Bastille Day.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, wasn't he? Yeah, he was released.
I think it was, yeah.
When they broke into Bastille and let everybody out, fucking Marquis was one of them. Little perv,
yes. Yeah. Yeah, we did a show about that too.
Yeah.
He's a fascinating character. But yeah, High Desert
didn't
said
have a pot to piss in.
No, he didn't.
He broke his shit. He was a Marquis, but his money was gone by the time he got out of prison.
Did you ever see the movie Quills? About the Marquis de Sade? It's actually quite good. I saw it a long time ago, but I remember really liking it. But it's
People confuse his
it's
fiction.
mostly about him being in prison.
Yeah, people confuse fact and fiction a lot. The shit that fucking the Marquis wrote was just his porn. He didn't do that. He probably tried
that
to
we
do
know of.
He probably tried to do that kind of shit.
Yeah.
He did shit that was similar. There's some things that he did do, but he didn't do all that. He didn't do what he was doing in the books. What he was doing in the books would kill people.
Yeah, he might have just been real imaginative.
Yeah, he's just real mad.
Because that's the thing, like a lot of people write erotica nowadays, and they put all kind of crazy shit in there, like having sex with werewolves and all that kind of stuff. It's like obviously you can't really do
and
that.
People don't realize that the Marquis, when he was doing all that trouble, he was pretty young. I think he started all that shit in his fucking late teens. And you had this fucking teenage manservant that followed him around everywhere. It was like his fucking boner boy. He'd fucking be praying, doing the catechism, and praying in front of the the Virgin Mary while his manservant was hitting him in the booty, and just he was fucking crazy, man. And then they'd go out and get hookers. He'd try to
Kind
give
of
them
a fun crazy.
Then he'd try to give them Spanish fly and try to get them involved in like BDSM type shit. And then they'd go to the cops and fucking complain about him, and he was a perv.
He was,
He was a perv, but he wasn't bad looking, evidently. I think there's drawings of him.
Yeah,
he's a little guy.
From the drawings of him, he looks like an okay looking dude.
Yeah,
but some of the drawings you don't know. Like they might have just made him look.
Might have glorified the way he looked.
It's like it was like the Instagram filter of the day.
1700s Instagram filter.
The beautifying filter.
Yeah.
Yes, that definitely does look like me.
Yeah.
Taking out all your acne.
But he wasn't a big intimidating guy.
Right.
He was described as being kind of small and waspish, I think, what they said. Probably kind of like Tyson.
Yeah.
Probably like that.
That's
Friend
Tom's.
of ours.
That's Tom's mini me.
Yeah.
In case because we've talked about that a lot of times.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, not for a while because that was a long time ago, but
That's probably what they're talking.
We've talked about that crazy situation before.
Yeah.
If anybody wants us to reiterate it, we'll do it on Friday night.
Yeah.
Because that was a fucking crazy ass. That was a crazy ass time in our lives. Yes, it was. So yeah. So he was at Sainte Marguerite for 11 years. And then, in the autumn of 1698, Saint-Mars, the jailer, he got another job as the governor of the very famous Bastille prison in Paris, obviously. And of course, as always, he brought the man in the mask, Dauger, along with him. Dauger was placed again in a solitary cell in a chamber in one of the towers. And they had one of the guys, there was a guy there who was assigned to come in once a day and feed him. And at this point, too, they reiterated, there was a letter that went around saying that the mask was black velvet, that he was brought in wearing a black velvet mask. Now, this prisoner was at the Bastille for about 5 years, a little over 5 years. And then he died in November of 1703. And he was buried on the following day under another pseudonym, Marchioli or Marchioli. So, like I said, if they know where the dude was buried, then they can DNA his ass. But I'm not, because they did bury him. That's why that whole story about, they found the skeleton with the iron mask in the Bastille, that's bullshit. One, the timing doesn't work out because the Bastille wasn't stormed until when was that? 1789? I thought that was much later. But he wasn't in the basement dungeon. He was in a tower, like in a regular cell, like a room. And when he died, they made a record of it, and they buried him under a particular name. Like I said, Marchioli or Marchioli. So, obviously, after this happened, because of Voltaire's thing, mostly, and because other people had seen him, and, like, other people, like, the story got around through people that had been in the prisons and had seen him and stuff like that. So the story was very intriguing to people because, obviously most of the people that were in prison, everybody knew why they were in there. It wasn't like a big secret. And, they weren't wearing masks. Their identity wasn't being, shielded, right? Yeah. I was like, what's the word? It starts with an S, and I couldn't think of it. But yeah, so this was unusual, and people were just kind of like, who the fuck could this dude possibly be? And so, this many centuries later, there's still theories about it and people are still talking about it because, like I said, who fucking is? And like I said, I don't even know where I come down on this. So let's talk about some of the candidates for who this person might be.
Okay.
Now, Voltaire, like I said, he was the one that was the first one to kind of write down a sort of quasi-fictional account of the Man in the Iron Mask, and was the one that popularized the idea that the mask was iron, when indeed it was velvet. His theory was that the Man in the Mask was actually the illegitimate half-brother of Louis XIV. So he would have been the son of Anne of Austria and Cardinal Mazarin, who was actually, he was the regent, I think, when Louis XIV, like before Louis XIV, when he was too young to take the throne, so he became like a minister or something like that, like leader. So that was kind of his thing, and he was kind of the first one to come up with this. He must have been like someone with a royal family or somebody that was embarrassing, somebody that was an illegitimate, that would have been a threat to the throne. So that was kind of like, he was the first guy to come up with that. And that was
this guy accountable for? Do we know where that guy went?
What guy?
The half brother.
Well, we don't know if there was one. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, we don't know if there was.
That's what his theory is.
This kind of attitude.
Well, that's his theory, is that it's like that would explain a lot, because it's like maybe if he had an illegitimate half brother that would have been a threat to the throne, then they would have like thrown him away in some dungeon. You know
Too
what I mean?
many ifs right there. We don't, now.
But like I said, now Voltaire, he didn't really say, as far as I know, that this was a true story. I mean, it was a novel, like it was fictional, but he did base a lot of it on fact.
Yeah.
But that was kind of his theory about it, was that that's who he made that character, like in the story. You know what I'm saying?
I think he was royalty, but I don't know if he was a half brother of the king. But that's.
Now, a very similar theory, and one of the most popular ones, and the one that usually turns up in most of the movie, and this is the one that turned up in the Leonardo DiCaprio movie as well. This theory comes from a French novelist named Marcel Pagnol, and he wrote a thing in 1965, and he said that he thought the Man in the Mask was Louis XIV's twin brother that nobody really knew about. The thing about it was that had Louis XIV had a twin, he points out that there was a lot of controversy, like in regards to royalty and genealogy, because they were very big on succession and whose kid was whose and who's the next one in the line for the throne. So there was a lot of controversy about when twins were born. They're like, well, which one would be the one that would be next in line for the throne? Would it be the older one, or would it be the younger one because they were conceived earlier? So it sounds dumb, but there was like a big controversy about this at the time.
So it could never be the one you like best.
What?
It has to be which one?
Yeah, it would have to be, because like the line of succession, they always had it kind of like that. Generally, it would be the older one, but then some people pointed out, but the younger one was conceived first.
That's a good theory, but I guarantee you, if King Louis was born out of a set of twins, that would have been a well-established fact.
Well,
his mama gave birth to twins.
Well, here
it'd be all through the fucking empire.
That was one of the things that immediately, like, everybody kind of came down about this. See, okay, so why a lot of people like this theory and why this is probably the most popular one that turns up in like books and movies and stuff is because, going back to what I was saying before, it's like, why would this motherfucker have had to wear a mask unless he resembled somebody that everybody would recognize? So they're like, well, obviously he must have looked just like the king, which would have been really embarrassing. So they had to like make him wear a mask all the time, which makes sense on the surface. But, and several other like historians have pointed this out, like when this popular theory came out, that it's like, the royal family, like when queens gave birth, they didn't just give birth in like a hospital or like by themselves. There was a whole bunch of people there.
30, 40 people
there was a
there.
whole bunch of people there, which sounds horrifying, but there was a whole bunch of
event.
Right, because it's like, this is the next, this is, this is
clergy and all the damn fucking,
because this is the next, person in line. This is going to be maybe our next king or queen or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like, so there's a bunch of people there.
Yeah,
so like, had he been born as, had he been born as a twin, that probably would have been something that
everybody
and even if they tried to cover it up, there would have been so many people there that somebody would have leaked that shit. You would think.
And if you had two twins that were destined for the throne, they'd have been celebrities, and they'd have been watched their whole lives of which is the best one and who do you like more. They'd have been celebrities, especially if they were good looking.
Yeah, I mean, you would think.
Yeah, but even in the Roman Empire, though, in the Roman Republic and shit like that, you never really heard of any. Well, even in the Empire after the Republic fell, you never heard of any kind of twins coming to the throne. That's just too unlikely. I ain't buying that.
And the thing about it, like, the guy tried to point out, he's like, oh, well, you know, Louis XIV's family line, like his genealogy, there were a lot of twin births in there, which, because, like I said, they do tend to run in families. But, like I said, that would have been unlikely. It would have had to have been, like, a big cover-up.
I also see another hole in this story. If this was the king's brother, he'd never send him to prison. He wouldn't do that. Even if he was a threat to the throne. He'd exile him.
Yeah, you'd think that option would be right there.
Because they did that shit all the fucking time.
I mean, why couldn't he just, like, send him to the New World, for example? They did that to a lot of people.
They did that shit a lot, and fucking real royalty usually would not use force against each other, their own family members. They would try to look, this is not going to work. You got to go. We're gonna give you a castle over here. Go over there. Don't come back. That's usually how they handle it.
I mean, that would have been the easiest thing to do.
That's not what he is. I think he's in the royal family, but he's not a king. Or the king's brother.
But yeah, so this guy in his book, he basically says, he's like, that there was twins born, but it was kind of like a little bit of a cover up, and then they sent the twin to Jersey, the island, under an assumed name, which was James de la Cloche, and he was imprisoned. Like, I guess he did say that he exiled him, but then Louis XIV put him in prison after he found out that his twin brother was, like, conspiring against him, like conspiring to take the throne back, and that was when he threw him in prison. So that was his theory. Now, the very famous story that Alexandre Dumas wrote, on which the Man in the Iron Mask movie is based, kind of goes the same way, where this is like a twin brother. So, like I said, this is probably, I don't know, this is arguably the most popular theory. And like I said, I think people are really hung up on the fact it's like, why would you put a mask on somebody unless everybody would recognize them? Which, I get that. That's a reasonable thing to think. But I'm not really sure if I buy that. Yeah. You know?
If you guys could help us out by hitting that like button, hit the like button, please. And if you're listening to this, recorded, I just want to remind you about the super thanks button, because we could always use your support.
Yes, thank you. That was very nice.
Yeah.
Oh, that scared the shit out of me.
Jenny, take that thing away. Thing fucking falls down. It scares the shit out of me.
I know. Well, yeah, it scares the shit out of me too all the time. It's just
a poster fell off the wall.
Yeah. Well, the other one fell down and I just left it.
You gotta get that in a frame anyway.
I know. Well, I don't have a frame for it because it's an awkward size.
Is it?
That's why.
Okay.
Like and I have to get like a special
Roll
frame
that bitch
for
up. Go get that. You can get that same photograph in a regular size and then do that.
No, that's actually one that I got that was like a special edition.
Oh, is it?
So that's why.
Okay. It's gonna ruin the walls.
But just kind of like put it back there.
Play-Doh. Is that gonna ruin the paint?
No, it'll just come off.
Right.
It just comes off. It's kind of greasy.
Okay.
Yeah, Tammy said it had to have proof that baby came out of that cooch.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's like they wouldn't just, the Queen didn't have no dignity or nothing like that. They're just like, we want to make sure that this like succession is fucking, gotta make sure that baby's like coming out.
Yeah, it's a royal birth. You know what I mean? They got to see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're like, ooh, we get to get
Yeah. She's putting it on full display.
Which is like pretty weird. And that's the thing. They didn't. Yeah. I'm sure they probably tried to keep some semblance of modesty and stuff, but like considering the time period,
they probably had covers and shit.
That's what I'd imagine that they probably had.
Couldn't really see.
Yeah.
The doctor.
Everybody's trying to like look in there.
Yeah. It was probably they had the midwives underneath.
You want to see the royal squish mitten?
Yeah. They probably had midwives underneath the covers.
Yeah, you'd think.
But nah.
There's just, I mean, I get it.
He's
like
royalty that had just killed him.
I get why this is the most popular theory, but I'm not really entirely sure.
And I don't think it was political intrigue. They just would have banished him if he was royal.
Well, like I said, his argument was they did banish him at first. Well, not banish him, but they sent him somewhere else, like under another name.
Yeah,
and then like he was fucking around and like conspiring against the king, and the king found out, and then he put him in jail.
I'm gonna stick to my guns, man. So far, it just sounds like he's a royal family member, and he committed a crime against another royal family member, and they didn't want that crime to be known, and they didn't want it to be known that that they locked that guy up, and he would have been recognizable. That's why. It brought shame to the family. That's what I think it is. If you were to go through the history and try to find out any of these, they probably told everybody that he died. So if you were to go through the history, through the genealogy, you find one that around the time that this guy was getting incarcerated, if there's a royal family member that's reported dead, a male family member reported dead, it's probably him. They arrest him, fucking tell everybody he died, and they throw him in prison under an alias. So they did something like that.
Do you know what another interesting theory is? And I think that a lot of people don't bring this up as much. But another theory that I heard was that the jailer, Saint-Mars, who was, by all accounts, a very ambitious person, actually came up with the idea of the mask himself so that everyone would think that the prisoner was important, so it would make him look better. Yeah. So I've heard that too, that it wasn't really anybody all that important.
A 30-year.
But he just liked the attention, because here's the thing: if this was somebody like a prisoner that you didn't really want anybody to know who it was or anything like that, in a way, like putting a mask on him and shit like that, like made people more interested.
Yeah.
Like if you'd have just like not had the mask on him, he'd just been some random motherfucker like walking around, like nobody would have thought anything about it. But the fact that they put a mask on him and made all of these accommodations, like everybody got interested. So some people have speculated that Saint-Mars himself like came up with some of that because he wanted everybody to think that he had this this task of like, oh my god, this is a super secret mission, or like a super important guy that I'm taking care of, like to make himself look better.
But you got to look at it this way.
But I have heard that too. I don't know if I buy that, but
no, I don't think I buy that. Because you got to look at it this way. The king said, I don't want anybody to know what he looks like. Cover his ass up, they'll recognize him. And to this day, we don't know who it is, so it worked. Yeah,
that's true.
We know he's important. They knew he was important. They didn't know who he was, though.
Yeah.
And that was the
So
point.
it did work.
It did work, right. So
because we still don't know who
whoever fucking ordered that was actually correct. Yeah. There was a mysterious prisoner there. We don't know who he is. Mission accomplished.
Yeah.
That's all he wanted.
True.
Yeah. And I guarantee it was one of his relatives. And it was somebody who wasn't doing political intrigue. They could just fucking exile you and give you a slap on the wrist. He committed a crime. That's what I believe. I believe he committed a crime against another royal family member. An attempted murder, a rape, something like that. That's what I think it is. And they couldn't have that get out. That'd have been too embarrassing. To say, yeah, Princess so-and-so got raped by her cousin. No, they're not going to fucking say it. They're not going to release that. No. Because that shit happened.
Well, yeah,
shit
of course.
like that happened. But they're not going to
That happens all the time.
Right. So it was something like that.
Through every age and in every social class.
Yeah, dude might have been drinking too much. He said, that's it. I can't take it. I'm going to get some of that. It's going to be some shit, stupid shit like that. And it caused a huge fucking scandal. And he really should have been thrown in prison or killed over it. But they couldn't do it. He was too high ranking. So they just sent him to prison the rest of his life, incognito. And he's fucking holding up the family honor. Okay, yeah, I won't let anybody know who I am. That to me, that's more plausible.
Tammy says, "To the royal drapes match the royal carpet." Ben says, even when the king was sick, hungover, or whatever, he had this ritual he had to attend. People thought the crops would fail if the king didn't go to bed in front of an audience. Sick people constantly came to court wanting the king to cure them by touching them. Yeah, like back in this time period.
What's more ice? Yeah,
back in this time period, they did. I think a lot of people did have a conception of the king as like some kind of divine being, or and Louis XIV, probably more than most, totally bought into that. It seems like I think he just thought he was God on earth, it seemed like. Okay, so the next one, which maybe I kind of feel like, well, I don't know if I think this one is more plausible or not. than the twin theory. I don't know if I buy the twin theory. I know it's very popular because that's very cinematic. And it makes a good, like I said, the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, they went with that theory. This one, maybe. I don't know. So, this theory, I believe, first appeared in 1955. Like, the historian came up with this one. He thought that maybe, like, on a kind of related note, that the man in the mask was actually the biological father of Louis XIV. Because Louis XIV's dad, Louis XIII, obviously. So Louis XIV was born in 1638. By the time that he was born, Louis XIII and his wife, Anne of Austria, were, they thought that they didn't have sex. Actually, they thought that maybe Louis XIII was perhaps impotent. And by the time Louis XIV was born, he was actually quite old. So, even at the time, it was perceived that Louis XIV being born, after all of this time was quote-unquote miraculous. So a lot of people thought maybe that was a little suspicious, that maybe Louis XIII wasn't actually Louis XIV's dad. Because like I said, there was a perception that he might have been allegedly impotent. So if this was indeed the case, the theory goes that good old Cardinal Richelieu, who at this time was the king's minister, he kind of thought, well, I'm going to see if I can bring somebody into this situation to impregnate Anne of Austria and have a male heir. Because if there wasn't a male heir, the next person in succession, the heir presumptive, would have been Louis XIII's brother, who was Gaston, Duke of Orleans. Now, Cardinal Richelieu was not a big fan of Gaston, and Gaston was not a big fan of Richelieu. If Gaston had taken power, if Louis XIII had not had an heir, and Gaston had come in, Richelieu would probably have been executed. So Richelieu did have cause to make it so that Anne of Austria did indeed have an heir. Now, if Louis XIII couldn't get it up, then it's theorized that Cardinal Richelieu found somebody who could and went in there and knocked up Anne of Austria. So they're not entirely sure who this presumed biological father then of Louis XIV would have been. Some people think that it might have been an illegitimate grandson of Henry IV. Some people think that it might have been just somebody like a courtier or somebody that was hanging around the castle, a guard or something like that. It's like, hey, who wants to come in and knock up the queen? You know what I mean? So that's the kind of theory. So they're saying that had that been the case, then the man in the mask was possibly the person that had knocked up the queen in lieu of Louis XIII. So because this was Louis XIV's biological father, they didn't really want anybody to know about it, but they didn't really want to kill him either. So they decided, to kind of like keep him hidden. Now, they didn't really, the story goes that they didn't really put him in prison until, because they did, like you said, they did actually, according to this theory, they did actually kind of exile him. They sent him to the New World. They sent him to the Americas. Just like, hey, just go over there and like, don't talk about it anymore. Because, it's supposed to be Louis XIII's kid. So he goes to the Americas, but then, the story goes, he came back and tried to essentially blackmail them, like get a bunch of money and say, hey, give me a bunch of money or I'm going to tell everybody about this. At which point they're like, well, we're just going to throw you in prison then with a mask on. Again, it seems to me that I mean, this kind of sounds plausible, too, especially because at the time Louis XIII was, like I said, quite old, and was thought to be impotent, and everybody thought it was, like, miraculous, quote-unquote, that, you know, Henry IV, or Louis XIV was born when he was born. So there's that. So, I don't know. This sounds plausible to me, but then on the other hand, had this been... Okay, if they'd had somebody like a surrogate that knocked up the queen, which, like I said, probably did happen. It's not that crazy.
Yeah, but I don't think they did it that way.
Well, I'm just saying that it's like, if they did that, if the dude was a royal or a member of the aristocracy, I could see them doing it. If it was just some rando that was like about like a guard or something like that, they would have just killed him.
They would have just killed him.
I would have thought they would just, especially if he came back causing trouble.
Here's the thing: you gotta be practical, and you gotta, when you're talking about conspiracy theories like this. Usually, when you had, back in these days, when you had a king who was trying to sire offspring with the queen, and it's not happening, usually the queen is blamed, not the king.
Well, yeah, of course. Women always get blamed for everything.
So women had their own underground. Women were a lot smarter than people give them credit for back then. They knew what... They knew what artificial insemination was.
You had to cover your ass.
They knew all about artificial insemination. So what they would have done is they just would have had the queen pick the cutest guy that she liked.
Yeah.
And they would have had like a girl servant go over there and give him a hand job or a blow job and spit it into a cup and then bring it back to the queen.
And cram it on up there.
And then the queen would know what to do with it. And then she'd have a fucking baby.
Put that in the turkey baster.
And her ass was out of the fire.
Yeah.
Simple.
Well, because the thing you had to think about, even if you were a queen, if you didn't produce a male heir,
your ass was on a chopping block.
You were in trouble.
But women were smart, man. They knew all about that. They had midwives. They knew about the cycle. They knew when a woman was fucking ovulating. They knew all that shit. So the queen wasn't stupid. She would have just gone to one of her handmaids, goes, "You see that cute little motherfucker over there? Fucking Earl of
Look at
Shire.
that ass.
All right, I want you to go down there and go fucking blow the fuck out of that. Spit it in here.
Spit it in a cup, bring it to me.
Bring it back. Like, okay, all right. She's like, he gonna be a proud new father. That's what would have happened.
And no one will even know about it.
Yeah, and then what would the queen be saying? I'm gonna put a good king on the throne next. Because those fucking queens didn't like those guys that they were forced into those marriages.
Yeah, they didn't choose the husband. They didn't choose those.
Yeah, but in a situation like that, she's choosing the dude.
Right.
Who's gonna have the...
Which she probably didn't get to.
Yeah. So she's gonna, that cute motherfucker right there. We're gonna get his baby. That's
a lot better looking than that old fat motherfucker.
Yeah, that fat motherfucker. Right there. He wasn't even cute when he was young. Inbred bitch. You know, that's the way they were, because they were. Fucking...
Well, you can't, like I said, you can't blame them.
Well, look at this big, healthy, strong baby you
like,
sired, sir. You know, fucking, yeah.
Well, see, I think that happened a lot because there were, like, a lot of rumors about it. It's like, wow, this son that supposedly belonged to the king is a lot, like, better looking and shit like that.
Yeah.
It's like, so that must be somebody else.
So this whole fucking childish concept of the queen is going to have to sleep with another man and, wow, we got to lock him up now? No, the queen just would have got a hold of his fucking seed. That's what they would have called it. Get his seed. Bring it to me. Yeah.
Bring me the seed.
Bring me his seed. And then she would have just done it fucking manually.
Yeah. Like
I
said,
had a real baby.
Turkey baster.
Had a real baby.
Or whatever the 1600s French equivalent of a turkey baster was. But I mean, turkey basters, that's not like high technology or anything.
No. All you needed was a damn tube and a plunger.
Yeah, they had some shit like turkey basters back then.
They had shit like that to give enemas.
Sure. So it's like, yeah, you probably could have used the same thing.
Yeah, and they artificially inseminated fucking animals, horses and shit. So they
knew how to do that.
They knew all about that.
And like I said, especially in the road, like maybe people don't think about it, but especially something where succession is so, and producing a male heir was so important. Yeah, and like I said, particularly for women because their asses were on the line. Like, if you married somebody like Henry VIII, you got your fucking head chopped off.
Yeah.
If you didn't do right.
What would have happened to her is that they would have fucking retired her and then brought a new queen in and tried again with somebody else, and she'd get stuck out in the cold. But she wasn't going to lose her job. That's some good welfare there. So, and she
That's
wouldn't
the
have...
best welfare.
And she wouldn't have to fool around on the king. See?
Right.
she could have
Yeah,
one
because
of her-
she's like, so it's a loophole. She's
Yeah.
like, technically,
Yeah, I didn't sleep with him.
I'm not cheating because
Yeah,
I'm
didn't
not.
cheat. Yeah.
I just
She
had.
didn't cheat on the case.
It was
She
just
get-
a little bit of fluid.
She just
Just
get
a
the
little
cutest
bit of fluid.
handmaiden she had to go fucking go over there and go get that dude's seed. Bring that back to me.
Yeah.
That's all they would have done.
Go jerk that dude off.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they would have kept that dude in the dark. He wouldn't know what was going on.
Yeah, see that's another thing is
Yeah.
that you wouldn't have this whole because that's like now that you bring that up, this
Yeah.
whole theory, which like I
Yeah.
said sounds kind of cool and everything, but it's like
No, it's not.
yeah,
practical.
because exactly what happens in the story
Yeah.
would happen in real life. Like
So
if you let this guy like knock up the queen,
His ass
he'd
is
be
on
like
lawn.
he'd be
Lawn.
like,
Yeah.
well, why don't you give me some money or I'm gonna blab?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's it's not practical. What's
So,
more
yeah.
practical is to steal his seed and inseminate the queen. And then that later on, fucking 9-10 months later, that dude's sitting there looking at that baby and goes, man, that baby looks familiar.
I can't quite place him.
Man, who's that look like?
Who does that look like?
Yeah, that's what would happen.
That's freaking me out.
Yeah. And look, I'm telling you, y'all know this, okay? Women aren't dumb, all right? Fucking,
Wow, really?
women aren't dumb.
I didn't know that.
They were doing this shit back in the fucking ancient Egyptian days.
Like I said, we have to cover
knew
our
all
ass,
that.
man.
They
Especially
knew all that.
because for the bulk of human history, like
Yeah.
we've kind of been at a disadvantage. So you kind of had to like cover
They-
your own ass.
Well, women were
Yeah,
into
to cover
special
your own-
operations.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. You
Women
had
were
to like
special
do everything on the down low.
Yeah.
Because if you got caught, you'd
Yeah.
get burned as a witch or who knows what
Yeah.
else.
Well, I think is that the women were a mafia. They covered for each other, but then they also played intrigue and shit. But a royal woman had handmaidens, and who knows what the relationship there was, you know, because you selected your own handmaidens, you know, a lot of times, and you fucking grew up with them, and I don't know if that was I think their actual love life centered around fucking love handmaidens.
I hope it did.
Because I don't think the men really were. First of all, the men weren't around that often, and then the ones that were losers,
They were probably dull as shit.
dull as fuck. Yeah.
Probably be a lot more fun to just be like hang out with all your girls,
instead
man.
of being all sapphic and shit, all these girls fucking.
Like I said, I hope it was like that.
They-
I hope they got some
They
enjoyment
probably got each other off and shit. Yeah.
out of the whole
Talking.
sad affairs. Because, like I said, a lot of them were just. I mean, you know, and I'm not saying
They didn't choose any of these guys.
Well,
to
I'm
marry.
just saying I'm not saying like boo-hoo because they were like fucking wealthy and it was probably better than like scrabbling around in the dirt and getting
Yeah.
scabies or whatever. But it's just
Yeah.
kind of like, you know, it wasn't fun for them either, particularly the women because, like I said, they were just forced into it.
Yeah, marriage was not about love at all.
That's a
Especially-
very modern concept.
Yeah, that's a modern, especially for rich, powerful people. Marriage was business, and it was alliances and merging empires together.
Yeah, it's like we don't want to start a war with
Yeah.
that country, so it's like I'm gonna marry
Yeah.
the
Those
a
chicks-
princess from this country, so you guys don't attack us.
Those chicks did not pick those dudes, and those dudes did not pick those chicks.
No.
But they had lovers a lot. The guys
Yeah.
did definitely, and I think the women did too. But I think
Yeah.
it was handmaidens, because they could get away with that a lot easier.
Well, yeah, and like I said, you know, there's kind of a double standard where it's like the dudes were kind of expected to have mistresses, but
Yeah.
it wasn't as acceptable. I feel like for
No, and
the queens, so they had to they had to keep shit on. the
Yeah,
down
but
low.
that made sense too, because you didn't want to as a noble dude fucking give all of your wealth to some other dude's kid,
Yeah,
and you didn't, you know what I mean? Because you wanted to make sure that your wife gave birth to your kids, not somebody else's kids. So that was the thinking there. They didn't have DNA tests back then, so
you are not the father.
yeah, they didn't have DNA tests back then, so you had to keep them under lock and key just in case.
Yeah, because you never knew whose kid
you never
that
knew
was.
whose kid it actually
until they got a
was.
little bit older, and you said that
That
motherfucker doesn't look like me.
And then what are you going to do? You're going to out your wife and make yourself look like a fool?
Right.
That you raised this kid? That
Yeah,
was
you got
15,
cucked
16?
out.
Yeah. Yeah, so, no, he's mine. He looks just like me.
Yeah, can't you see it?
Yeah, right,
Sure.
yeah.
Yeah, that's it. There's also a theory, this isn't a super popular theory, but this is sort of related. There's also a theory that there was, and this might have been just something that people came up with for their own like political agenda or whatever, but they were saying that the man in the Iron Mask was actually a woman. And it was because Anne of Austria did have a kid, but it was a daughter. And they were like pissed off about it, so they chucked the daughter in the thing and put a mask on her so nobody would know who she was. So
Absolutely not.
yeah, I don't think so either.
No.
Like that was just one that I saw and I was just like, wow, that's one
that's
you know
good
really.
to mention, but no
That
way.
yeah, that's I think that's a lot of bullshit because like I said, this
There's been
dude
other
like
ways to
people
handle that.
saw that well and people saw the prisoner.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Other prisoners saw
And
him, the
talked to him.
jailer saw him and talked to him and stuff like
Yeah.
that. It was a dude. So, you know what I mean? But I get that that's cute and everything like that, but you know. Okay, so here's another theory. Now, this one was from a French military historian named Louis Gendron. And he actually discovered some coded letters. And they were decoded in the 1890s. And these letters were in the what they call the Great Cipher of Louis XIV. Now, apparently, these letters, when decoded, are referring to a prisoner, and they name him as a general, a French general named Vivien de Boulogne. Now, Boulogne, they say what crime he was accused of. He was actually accused of cowardice, and this was during the siege of Cuneo, I guess is how you would pronounce it, in 1691. So troops from Austria were coming at him, and he shit his pants, metaphorically, and maybe literally too, I'm not entirely sure. And he's just like, let's get the fuck out of here. Left behind a bunch of his wounded dudes and a bunch of his like weapons and munitions and stuff like that. So, you know, not great, not a good look. So the king was understandably kind of pissed about this. And he ordered this dude, this general, and this is a quote, to be conducted to the fortress at Pignerol, which was where the first prison where the man with the iron mask went to, where he'd be locked in a cell and under guard at night and permitted to walk the battlements during the day with a 330309. Now, for whatever reason, people have speculated that 330 is the code for mask. I don't know where they get that idea from, but that's kind of what they say about it. So because, like I said, this letter was in a code. Why you keep fucking with the
Don't keep fucking with shit.
Quit fucking with shit. Just be
I
still.
gotta fuck with some shit here.
No, you don't. Just
Okay.
be still.
I'm trying to get it fucking
Be
centered.
still. But yeah, so some people said, okay, well maybe that's this dude. Why he would have to wear a mask, no one really knows particularly. But the thing about it is that other historians have come forward and said, well, this dude did exist, General de Boulogne, but they're pretty sure that when he was arrested, it was public, like it was published in the newspaper, you know what I mean?
Right.
So it wasn't like a big secret or anything like that. Also, they're pretty sure they have records that he died in 1709, whereas they're 99.9% sure that the man in the iron mask died in 1703. So they think this dude lived 6 years longer. So they're not entirely sure about that, but that's like another theory. So another theory is that the dude is an Italian diplomat. And this dude, I've actually already brought him up because he was allegedly one of the other prisoners that was at Pignerol, like the first prison where the man with the iron mask was taken. So they think maybe the guy was Count Ercole Antonio Mattioli. That's who I was talking about before. Now, he was the guy, and I think I brought this up a little bit before. He was a diplomat. He was Italian, and he was a minister of Ferdinand Charles, who was the Duke of Mantua at the time. And he was supposed to negotiate this treaty, a treaty in 1678, where they were supposed to do this whole deal. There was like a fortified town called Casale, and he was supposed to negotiate like the sale of this little town to France. So he said he was going to do that, but then he went and told like all these other foreign powers about it, like so he could kind of line his own pockets, I guess. And Louis XIV found out about it and was really mad, so had him kidnapped and put into the prison in 1679. So they do know this dude existed, like I said, and he was at Pignerol at the same time as the man in the iron mask, but they're not sure if he was the same dude or not. And they think that he died in Sainte Marguerite which was another prison that the Man in the Iron Mask was also at. But he died in 1694, so considerably before the Man in the Iron Mask died. So they don't know if that's like the same dude or not. So then there's this guy. So remember when I said that when the Man in the Mask was brought to the prison at first, like the first written records they have
what
of him.
year was that? Do you remember?
1669.
Okay, 69.
1669. Yeah.
That's the year they need to focus in on. That's how you figure out who that is. 1669. Who died in 1669? I bet you that's him.
No, he didn't die in 1669.
No, listen to what I'm saying. What man in the royal family died in 1669? And I bet you that's him. I bet you they claimed him dead at that time, but actually they were whisking him off to prison.
Yeah, maybe. Well, maybe you should research it and write a book.
Yeah. Well, I whoever was related to the king who died in 69, that's probably who they sent to prison.
I'm laughing, sorry. Victor just got here and I was laughing. And he said, isn't it weird how William and Harry were really good looking for a while and then bam, they look like Mr. Burns from The Simpsons. Oh, well. Well, you know who their real dad is, I guess.
Yeah, actually, that whole British royal family weren't very good looking. I think it was
It's all them recessive genes,
Recessive genes. And which is strange because the British common people are very good looking.
Well,
I mean, look at Billy Idol. He was from the ghetto of England. Motherfucker was handsome as shit, man. And there's a lot of them like that. But they're royal people who are kind of ugly.
Well, see, that's what, just like Eddie Izzard said. He said that's because it's a bad idea when cousins marry.
Yeah.
What are you talking about the royal?
Yeah, and every one of them dudes in Duran Duran was a fucking poon hound. Good-looking dudes, you know what I mean? England's got good-looking people.
They got some uggos too, just like everywhere else.
It's like everywhere else, but the thing is
everywhere has good-looking people.
You
and
would think that their
uggos.
royal family would be like fucking supermodels.
Well, no royal families never look good. Like I said, because of inbreeding. Everybody knows that.
Gotta be.
Well, yeah. Why do you think they're all so funny looking?
Kind of funny looking.
Like every now and then you get kind of a good looking one, like when they're younger.
Like Di was kind of cute, but she wasn't anything.
Well, she wasn't. She married into the royal family.
Yeah, okay, and she was not gorgeous, just kind of cute.
So she wasn't like. I think she was kind of. I can't remember what her lineage was, but she wasn't like royal. She was kind of like. Wasn't her parents like
Germans anyway?
Duke or something like
that?
They're all
Germans anyway.
I don't know.
I think they're all Saxons or some shit like that.
What are they, like House of Hanover? Whatever.
Yeah,
I lose track of all of that.
They invaded England
genealogy.
And took over fucking
I think they're too worried about it.
Thousands of years ago, whatever.
Yeah. So yeah. So remember when I said that when this dude was first brought to the prison, they said that his name in the letter was Eustache Dauger. So for a long time, historians had thought, well, that must be a pseudonym because they're trying to cover up his identity. But one historian was like, what if it's not a pseudonym? What if that was really his name or a variation of his name? So he's like, I'm just for shits and giggles, I'm going to see if there was anybody with that name or a variation of that name that had anything to do with this film. And maybe that's who it is. Maybe they weren't lying. Maybe that was his real name. So thank you very much, Victor.
What's up, Vic? What do you say?
Bottom of the gene pool, you're just scraping the barrel there. We haven't got enough for any more of your royals there. Sorry. Yeah, that's what. Eddie Izzard, obviously he's hilarious, but it's he has a great bit because he's British, He has a great bit about the royal family. It was super funny. But yeah, he was just talking about how fucking inbred they are. But yeah, it's pretty funny.
Yeah, that does not represent the British people though.
Well, no, it never does.
Just make it clear. Fucking, you can go on StreamMate where we stream on StreamMate. Look at the British girls that are streaming in there. Are fucking knockouts. They got real good looking women there. It's just they're not in the royal family.
And it's not, and we're not gonna say too because we talk about StreamMate a lot because we do that, but it's not a given that everybody that's on StreamMate is gonna be good looking because no,
you got some real.
You got some all kind. You got all kinds on there.
Yeah, and they make funny too. It's
which is fine. It's fine.
Some people they got. That's customers out there, they got clients out there.
I think that's kind of cool.
Well, it's some there are clients out there that want to get off to people who look just like them.
Yeah, which like I said.
Which is kind of what me and Jenna found. A lot of guys that turn their camera on, they basically look like us. They're not The ones that turn their cameras on.
Like
or better.
not in a weird way, but you know what I mean.
You know,
Yeah.
Fucking one dude looked like a lot of them are into fitness and shit.
Yeah.
So,
Well, like you said, it's probably you just want, which is kind of weird because you think like if you're looking at porn essentially, that you'd want like some kind of fantasy aspect of it, and there is, but it does seem like people kind of stay within, or maybe some people like stay within a tier of like, well, they want something that's like more realistic, maybe, I don't know. Well, because the thing about
they
it,
want people who are like them.
well, and if you're looking at Streammate, I mean that's all amateur.
Yeah.
So
Well, they got porn stars on there too, though.
well, yeah, but I mean, you are kind of like maybe primed to more be into like amateur. You want like people that are more like regular looking.
I was talking to Nina Hartley on there. She was streaming,
Yeah.
and I jumped in on my other account and said, and I called her Auntie Nina, and she's fucking laughing. She goes, "Oh yeah, me and your uncle go way." What do you say? I may be your uncle's husband, but I'll never fucking tell him. It's just funny shit. And I said, "Look, I just want to say hi. I've been a long time fan since the '80s." Fucking, and she goes, "Oh, you must be about 50." I said, "Yeah." And I said, I'm streaming on Streaming with my girlfriend. She goes, "Oh, you guys having fun?" I fucking told her where our channel is. She went in and looked at us.
Wow.
Yeah, she goes,
She's
"Oh yeah, you
famous.
guys can do great." Then she goes, "No, you gotta make sure that you make time for each other, because if you're doing those shows all the time, you can't live a love life that way." You know, she's just trying giving that kind of advice.
Which we kind of figured.
We already know that.
We kind of figured that.
Yeah, well,
Because it's kind of two, like it's kind of the same, but it's kind of two different things, to be honest.
yeah, she'd give it a relationship advice.
Yeah.
And she's like, "How do you handle all that time?" And I said, "Well, we're gonna do 3 hours and 3 hours, and during that time, you only get a couple clients." She goes, "Oh, okay, yeah." She's like, how often do you have to kind of assist? No, I outlast those dudes. So you know what I mean? Fucking, they're only on there for about 5 minutes. And she's like, "Oh, okay." She's giving me the thumbs. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. They're not on there right now.
Yeah, but she didn't, because she didn't know anything about streaming as a couple. She'd never done it.
Yeah, that's true, because
Yeah.
it does seem like the vast majority are just like single
Yeah, because she
women.
asked me, she's like, "Well, how many fucking money shots do you have to come up with?" And I said, "None."
Not really.
Because those
No.
dudes fucking busted nut and are out of there before I'd even get started.
Yeah.
Like, "Thanks, guys," because they fucking show up, fucking gun in hand, ready to go. They're gonna pay $6.99 a minute. They're only gonna try to get 4 or 5 minutes out of you.
Yeah.
Longest one we ever had was 15 minutes,
Yeah.
and he had his camera on.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's trying to put on a show for us too.
Yeah.
I was tripping. We're wingmanning each other. I'm giving a thumbs up. He's giving a thumbs up. Fucking, he's looking at Jen. Fucking, it's fucking fun. And he was only in his 20s. These are young guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just
It's
fun.
just kind of funny, you know.
Yeah. Starting that full time next week.
Yeah. Next week we're going full time.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to it. I want
I
to
am
be back
too.
home.
I want to be back home too. I'm
Yeah.
tired of driving.
Start making money, man.
I'm tired of driving.
Tired of driving.
And my car is getting old.
My car's getting too old. We're gonna get you another car though.
I know.
We're gonna do well on Streammate.
Yeah, I think so.
And our mini vids, people are asking us. Somebody asked us for a custom video, so we got to go in there and set up our custom video services.
Yeah, that's another
we
form.
can only we can only sell custom video through mini vids. And there's a big thing that we got to fill out about what the prices are for what and how many.
Yeah.
What was it? How much per minute and all that kind of stuff and
what you're gonna put in.
what you're gonna put in and how much it's gonna cost. So basically we have to write a menu.
Yeah.
That's what they're asking us to do.
DV Dragon.
Because Minivids wants their cut.
Yeah.
We can't sell behind their back.
DV Dragon said you guys should do a Man in the Iron Mask theme show. Yeah, we should. All right, so I'm almost done. I almost got like a couple more things.
Good.
Okay, so like I said,
We're actually ahead of schedule.
yeah. Well, like I said, I tried to keep, and I read my notes through like lots and lots of times. So I was like, I need to like compress this down.
Yeah,
It's like
compress
so
it
as
down.
long as we don't go through too many like tangents. But yeah, so this historian is like, okay, well, he's like, just theoretically, he's like, what if the name that they gave, Eustache Dauger, was actually the dude's name or a variation of the dude's name? So he's like, I'm going to go back through the genealogical records and stuff like that and look for, he didn't just look for that specific name, but he looked for like variations of that name. And he came up with a guy named Francois Dauger de Cavoy. And he was actually a captain in Cardinal Richelieu's Musketeers. And he was married to a woman that was a lady-in-waiting at the court of Louis XIV's mother, who was Queen Anne of Austria. And it so happened that one of their kids, they had 11 of them, like several of them died, which happened a lot back then, but But one of their kids was named Eustache Dauger de Cavois. Now, he was born in 1637. His dad and his two older brothers were killed in a war in battle. And Eustache became like the head of the family at that point because he was at that point the oldest son. Now, it turns out, at least according to this one historian who looked into this particular dude was involved in a series of scandals starting in 1659. And he was also linked with a very famous episode in French history known as the Affair of the Poisons, which is maybe something we should do a whole show about, but just like for a broad thing. Like, the Affair of the Poisons was this kind of thing. It happened in between 1677 and 1682, and it was this kind of big scandal where it turned out that a bunch of very prominent aristocrats were implicated for poisoning several people and for doing like black masses and shit. So a lot of them were brought up on charges of like poisoning and witchcraft and stuff like that, and 36 of them were executed. So this was like a very, very famous scandal at the time. So they're suspecting that this person that they think, well, he had a similar name as the quote unquote, pseudonym that they gave to the Man in the Iron Mask. They thought that he might have been involved in the Affair of the Poisons as well. And this is kind of how it's a little bit convoluted. But so what happened was that him and some of his buddies in 1659, they go to this big party at this castle, like over the Easter weekend. I think it was the Duke of Vivonne. I think it was his castle. So they go to this party. This party was apparently a real rager. And there was all kind of like debauchery going on.
Yeah, they partied like a motherfucker in France in the 1600s,
sure.
1700s. Or it was like porn shit. Yeah, they were
well,
hardcore.
And also porn and violence,
Yeah.
because apparently at this party there was this elderly guy there who said that he was an attorney of Cardinal Mazarin, and they all beat the shit out of him. Also at this party, they supposedly did a black mass, so there's that. So apparently this party was like pretty out there because like news about it came out and a bunch of people got like arrested or got in trouble because of like some shit that went on at this party.
LARPing. They'd LARP a lot.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. Black masses and shit, and they do the rituals, and yeah, there's a lot of shit. And then later on in the French Revolution, that comes back up again. Go ahead.
But yeah, so they don't know if this Eustache person was arrested at that time, but they think he was arrested later on in 1665 because allegedly he was real drunk, him and this Duke de Foix, and they killed a page boy. Like, they just got in this big drunken brawl and killed this boy. So that was like another scandal, and he was jailed because of that. Like, he was forced to resign his commission, and when his mom died, her will was like, fuck that guy, I'm gonna give all of my money to like the other kids that aren't fuck ups. You know what I mean? So they speculate that because he was written out of his family's will and was kind of seen as a black sheep, that it's possible that he started making poisons because in the whole Affair of the Poisons, where all of these aristocrats were poisoning each other willy-nilly, there was a supposed physician whose name was Dauger or Auger, who was supplying poisons to all of these people. So this historian is speculating that that physician might have been this dude, that's how he was making money, by making poisons and selling it to these aristocrats. They don't know if that's the case, but that's like the speculation. So he's saying that because the dude's name was close to the name that they gave for the Man in the Iron Mask when he turned up at the prison, that it might be this dude, because he did seem to kind of like tick the boxes.
Okay.
He was from a royal family, or like an aristocratic family. He was an embarrassment. He'd been in prison several times for doing all kind of fucking crazy shit. And like I said, he also might have been linked to the affair of the poisons in the sense that he might have been supplying poisons to the aristocrats that were later executed.
Okay, so they're locking him up and hiding his identity because he sold poison to aristocrats. That's his.
Among other things, yeah.
Okay, they would have killed his ass
You would think.
because it's safer to just kill him and silence him, so the names of the aristocrats don't get out. If that's what they're worried about.
I mean, they did know who the aristocrats were because they killed 36 of them.
Then they just would have killed him.
You would think that, yeah. That they wouldn't go to all that trouble.
No.
So like I said, this is an interesting theory. It's very convoluted, and I get where the dude was coming from because he's like, well, maybe the name that they gave for the Man in the Mask wasn't a pseudonym. Maybe that was his real name or a variation of his real name. So going through, so that's not a dumb idea. Like going back and seeing if there was a dude that matched up, and this dude did seem to kind of like tick some of the boxes that would have been. But the thing about it is that they found out like later, allegedly, this dude was in prison, but he was in another prison, like an asylum, which was run by monks. At the time that the Man in the Mask was in Pignerol. So they don't think it was the same guy. They think this guy was in prison, but he was in a different prison at the same time as the Man in the Mask was in a different prison. You know what I'm saying? And they also think this isn't real solid because it's just like this was another inmate at a prison. But this other inmate at a prison said that this guy, the poison guy, allegedly, died in the 1680s, like from alcoholism. He was an alcoholic. And they think that he died before that. And like I said, the Man in the Mask didn't die until 1703. So they're not really sure if that was the same guy or not. Like I said, it was a good idea. It was a good idea, and like I can see how you would get excited about that, but there's some evidence to suggest that wasn't the same dude.
The Man in the Mask, how old was he when he was incarcerated, more or less, and how old was he when he died? Do we know this?
Well, no, because they don't know who he was, so they don't know when he was born.
No, okay.
He was
he lived for another 30 years.
He was imprisoned in 1669, and he died in 1703.
I'm thinking
I don't know how old he was when they brought him to the prison.
Late 20s, early 30s when he's arrested.
I'm assuming he was young. I'm assuming he was youngish.
I know how to crack this case. You just look at the king. You try to find out his relatives, male relatives that were around 30, late 20s, early 30s, claimed dead or disappeared in 1669. And that's who you're probably looking at. He's a relative of the king. The king knows him. He didn't want to kill him. He doesn't want anybody to know that he's in prison either. And he committed a crime. That's what I believe. That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
Thank you very much, Jeffy Art.
What's up,
Said,
Jeffy?
just got home from 12 hours of teaching classes in downtown Miami.
Oh, shit.
Thank you guys for providing me with an entertaining commute home. Well, you're very welcome.
Appreciate it.
We're having a good time with this.
Yeah.
Slasher Fred said, do you consider the story of the Man in the Iron Mask to be a sequel or a spin-off to the Three Musketeers? Well, because the Man in the Iron Mask was a real dude, and the Three Musketeers were based on real dudes also. So it's not really like, I don't know if I'd really call it a sequel. Like I said, most of the dudes that the Three Musketeers were based on, most of them were dead or weren't musketeers anymore by the time this all happened. So I guess this would be kind of like a sequel. But they're, they do kind of like, there is some crossover.
The Man in the Iron Mask was a real thing.
Yeah, he was a real guy.
It wasn't iron. It was black velvet.
Yeah.
And it was a mysterious prisoner. Nobody knows who he is.
They still don't know who he was.
They don't know who he is. But I'm telling you this, the only thing that fits is that the king knows him, the king is related to him, or they just would have killed him. All right? And he committed some kind of crime, and they didn't want the crime to be known. So it was an embarrassment to the family. Probably, so I'm thinking a crime against a woman. I think he committed a crime against a woman in his own family. And they had to punish him, but they didn't want anybody to know about it. And they didn't want the crime to be known about, because it would dishonor the family and the woman. I think he did something like, he's in the royal family, he's related to the king, he gets drunk at a party, or maybe not that, it might have had a relationship going on with his cousin, one of his cousins or something, you know what I mean? And king doesn't want it out that his cousins are fucking each other. That kind of shit, It was some kind of crime of violence, sexual violence, I think. That's just my gut instinct. Anything else they would have just banished him for. It's just something, political shit that he just banished a high-ranking guy. They weren't even sending him to prison for that. So he had to be punished for something that he did, and what he did was shameful.
But so, okay, so the last theory, and this is the most recent one. This is the one that just came out in 2016. And this comes from an American historian named Paul Sonino. And he wrote a book called The Search for the Man in the Iron Mask. And he's been researching this for quite a while. Now, he came up with, he's running with the theory that the stuff in the letters about him being a valet was true. He thinks, his theory is, that Eustache Dauger was indeed a valet, and he was a valet to the treasurer of the cardinal that we were talking about earlier, Cardinal Mazarin, who was the minister of France during Louis XIV's childhood and was kind of like the regent who ran shit like when Louis XIV was a kid. Now, this cardinal had a fuck ton of money, and some of that money he actually gave to the king. Now, they think that a large portion of this fortune that the cardinal had amassed, he had actually stolen it from the previous king and queen of England. And that at this point, his valet knew about this, and there was a whole scandal where Louis XIV was trying to get the current king of England like into this whole into the whole like Franco-Dutch war, and it had something to do with like all of this embezzlement kind of shit. And they think that Eustache Dauger knew about this, like knew all of the details of it, and that was what put a target on his back and got him arrested. For whatever reason, they didn't want to kill him because he was the valet to a very high-ranking man, but he did know all of this shit that was like political intrigue and like about this huge theft from a royal family, and so they wanted him to basically be in prison and not be able to talk to anybody about anything that he knew. So that's the latest theory about it, that he is a valet, but he was a valet to a very important dude that had some like information. Because like I said, in the letters, they actually did imply that he was being imprisoned because of what he knew and what he was employed to do. So that's the thing that they're going with.
The thing is, though, is a valet is hired help. You could just kill one of those back in those days. Or another option that you could do is just say, yeah, you know about all this shit. You're working for me now. You know what I mean? And then you give this guy a job. And you keep him silent because you're paying him. That's another thing that you can do. It just doesn't match up to me. It just
See,
doesn't
well,
match
that's
up.
the thing. It's like
It
that's
does not match
that's
up.
why this is so mysterious still,
Yeah.
because it just seems like if it was anybody that knew some like information and did some fucked up shit, most of the time they would just have them killed.
They just kill you. Yeah, these people.
They
were
would just
not-
have them killed. Why
Yeah.
would they go to all the trouble and expense of like keeping this dude
Yeah.
alive for 34 years under
Yeah.
the same jailer and like keeping a mask on him and like building out like specifics on the cell, like with the doors and everything, like, so nobody could talk to him? Why would they go to all that trouble?
See, they wouldn't.
I mean, they didn't do it for anybody else.
What you're having is these investigators coming up with these theories. They
Well,
have-
because nobody knows, so they're
nobody
always
knows.
trying to come up with
What I'm
something.
saying is these guys coming up with these theories are given kind of having kind of a romantic fixation with the monarchs of the past, as if they had honor. They didn't. They didn't. By no means. Monarchies are the highest form of organized crime. They're basically mafia families that have put themselves in charge, and then they have all this regalia and shit. If you were a threat to them and you were not part of their family or an aristocrat, they killed you. They killed you. They had no problem killing peasants and things, guys like valets. Even if they were innocent, it didn't matter. So, no. He was related to the king. It had to have been. He was related to the king. He committed a crime. He had to be punished. But they were hiding the crime. They were hiding who he was. I would look at King Louis's family. Whoever would came up missing or was never mentioned after 1669, or whoever died around 1669, that's the Man in the Mask. It's one of his fucking relatives.
Now I almost kind of want to try and figure it out.
Yeah. It's one of the king's relatives. He doesn't
It would
want to
take
kill-
like years and years of like research, I'm sure,
He
but
didn't want to kill him because he knows him, he likes him. But he says, you got to spend the rest of
because
your
like I
life
said,
with him."
anybody that wasn't
Yeah.
in your family
Yeah.
or important or in the aristocracy, they would have just killed
They just would have
them.
killed you. Yeah.
So it's like I'm not really sure.
He's related to the king, or related to one of the king's friends, maybe. But even that.
Because the fact that
Yeah.
even back in the day,
Yeah.
people were talking about it means that it was highly unusual.
Yeah.
The way he was being treated,
Yeah.
the precautions they were taking about people finding out who he was. So it's like, so obviously it had to be some big deal because, why would they bother otherwise?
It was a crime. All this stuff about, he was sleeping with this one, and then the valet knew that she was fucking around. And they were stealing money. That was common. That didn't bother them that much. It didn't.
Well, because it's like, what the fuck
They
is
were all
anybody
doing
going to
that
do
shit.
about
They
it?
were kind of degenerate. Yeah, nobody could do anything about it anyway.
Right.
And it was kind of like, from my readings, what I remember, some of these aristocrats, like I said, they were all in arranged marriages. They didn't choose their spouses. They were loyal to their spouses, a lot of them, though, and the fact that they were in business together. But you read in the fine print, they're fucking other people.
Yeah.
That was real common because they were forced together.
Yeah.
They didn't really, it wasn't a love marriage. So that shit went on all the time. People fucking the hired help,
And it's like, and I think
That kind of
everybody
stuff.
knew about it. I think it was kind of like gauche to talk about it.
Yeah.
But everybody knew that it was going on.
And according to Desaad wanted to be in the clergy, and I think his brother made it to the clergy first, and his brother told him all about what horrors the fucking nuns were, and all the fucking priests, and that they were just totally...
See the Ken Russell movie, The
Yeah,
Devils,
yeah.
for further information.
So once he heard all these stories, and I think he saw it with his own eyes, that the clergy was fake, that they were having orgies and just shit, that he turned his back on all that and just fucking plunged himself deep into depravity.
Well, he's like, you might as well.
Yeah.
It's like, well, I'll just be depraved instead of like being
Yeah.
depraved, but with a veneer
With a
of
veneer of
godliness.
respectability, yeah. They weren't
Because that's
like
a
that.
little hypocritical.
All that shit went... You see, the reason why nuns took care of orphans is because they had to take care of their children.
What? That's not
Yeah,
mine.
all those children in the nunnery that the nuns were their children, and they were the children of the monks and the
Orphans.
priests. They were the priests' children because they were screwing all the priests. And yeah, they might have had some street kids in there to make it look right, but that was mostly their kids.
I mean, I mentioned the Ken Russell movie, The Devils, but that was actually based on a true thing too. So.
Yeah, and France was the epicenter of all that debauchery back in the 1700s.
Well, like I said,
they
anytime
were knee deep in it.
anytime you, and it wasn't just France, it was just like anytime you have like this royal family kind of situation where they have just like all the money and all the power and stuff like that, obviously
Yeah.
like 99% of people are gonna abuse that.
They abuse that shit,
They're gonna
and nobody
abuse
could
that
stop it. And
That's what I mean, and they know
were the
that.
law.
That's why they abuse it,
Yeah.
because it's like they know it's like, what's anybody gonna do? What are you gonna do? Arrest me?
Yeah, they were above the law.
No. Yeah,
If you
they can do
accuse
whatever
them
the
of a
fuck they
crime,
want.
they'd have you executed.
Right. So it's like
Fucking-
you couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
You couldn't do anything.
So they didn't do things like, well, he knows about this deal, so we're gonna have to put him in prison the rest of the... No, they would just kill you. He was a friend. The only thing that makes sense to me, fucking knowing what I know just over my lifetime and fucking understand how monarchies worked and what was going on in France. Fucking, I read Tale of Two Cities, read fucking Dumas, which we mentioned, Alexander Dumas, read some of his stuff. Just read histories and saw a bunch of programs on fucking how things happen, Robespierre and all that shit during the French Revolution. No, they just killed you if you were a threat to them. If you knew shit about them, it kind of really wasn't a threat to them because you couldn't do anything about it anyway. So the only thing that makes sense is that whoever this guy in this mask was, the king knew him and liked him, but he had to be punished. He committed some kind of a crime. And it's going to be something real fucking embarrassing. And my instinct tells me he committed something like a rape. on somebody he was related to in the royal family, and they didn't want to dishonor her by having a big trial, and they just wanted to hush the whole thing up, and he agreed to it, and they put him.
Yeah, that's another thing.
He
Maybe
agreed to
the
it.
man in the mask was
Yeah, he agreed to
complicit in the whole situation.
Yeah.
Like maybe it was a deal.
It was a deal. It was a deal.
It's
They were
like,
either
well,
gonna kill him,
we could execute you. Like we'll
and they
put
would-
you in the
they-
fucking guillotine,
yeah.
or
Well, no, they would have done it in private. They would have executed him in secret, somewhere on a manor, and then just claimed
push him
that
off a cliff.
and then just claimed that he died. You know what I mean? They just would have hid the whole. There would have been a trial. Just, we know you did it. She said you did this and that. We can either cut your head off and bury you and just say you died of a heart attack, or you can spend the rest of your life in this prison, and you keep your mouth shut, and we'll keep our mouths shut.
But we'll kind of take care of
Yeah,
you.
we
But you
will,
can't
yeah.
talk to
Just
nobody,
don't
and
tell
you have to
anybody.
like,
It was
and
something
nobody
like
can
that.
like
It
look
was
at
something
you.
like that.
Well, like I said, it must have been something extraordinary.
Yeah, it wasn't about
Because they didn't treat, because there were other political prisoners, there were other prisoners
Yeah.
that did embarrassing shit,
Yeah.
and they didn't treat them like
No.
this. So there must have been something else.
It was
going on.
personal. It was he
must
committed
have
a
been something
crime
else
against the royal family, and he was part of the royal family. And I'm just thinking there's a woman involved. That's just what my instincts are telling me. Because anything else, they just would have dealt with it in another way. Because a lot of the other shit, like talking shit about the king, plotting against the king, that was real common shit.
Well, and like I said,
and they knew how, they dealt with that openly.
well, like I
Or-
said,
yeah.
when they took the man in the mask, when they took him to the first prison, Pignerol,
Yeah.
the 3 or 4 other prisoners that were there, they were there for like embezzlement, conspiring against the king, like that kind of stuff. But everybody knew who they were.
Yeah.
They weren't like trying to hide their identities or anything.
Right. And if a high-ranking like relative of the king was doing something like stealing money from the king, he'd have got a slap on the wrist, because that was just money. They could fucking print money. Basically,
It's like, we are the money.
it'd have been
bitches.
like fucking. You're gonna make me look bad. Okay, look, I'm gonna dock you this much money and give me that manor that I gave you over in Brittany. That's mine now. You shut the fuck up.
You shut the fuck up.
It would have been something like that.
Or whatever the 1600s French equivalent of shut
You
the fuck up was.
Okay, and you try to steal from me, I'm gonna steal some of your shit. You shut the fuck up. If you piss me off, I'm gonna send my men down there and get you. And they would have dealt with it like that. They took care of it inside their own family, and the public wouldn't even know about it. British history is like that with kings taking over other kings. It could get pretty fucking ruthless. And if you looked at how they conducted themselves, you're basically talking about mafias.
Yeah, it's the same
It's
thing.
all they were.
It's the same.
It's all they were. They just had a lot of money, and they were the official government, but they were fucking mafias.
Yeah. Scary.
So I think he's a relative of the king. If not, he just would have been killed. He committed a crime against a member of his own family, and they didn't want that to get out. So he agreed to just fucking go in silence and fucking solitary confinement. Kind of
Well,
like the equivalent of fucking sending some chick to a nunnery.
Well, like I said, now that you bring it up, it had to be something, because if you just did something, like I said, if you just embezzled from
Yeah,
the
they
king,
didn't care
because
about it.
like the other dude that was in there, he had done that exact thing, and it's just like nobody was embarrassed about that, so
Yeah.
it had to be something
something
different
personal,
or like
something
of a
personal.
different caliber.
Yeah, it was something personal. It was something.
Because otherwise, they
salacious.
would have just put you in there like under your real name, and everybody
Yeah.
knew who the fuck you were. you
Yeah,
know?
they're like, yeah, you stole money from the king. Okay, do your time.
yeah, because they
That's
would
all.
want to make an example of them
Right,
too.
yeah. Yeah.
But this was something this must have been something
It was
unusual.
something bad, like you raped your own sister, something like that, and they didn't want that to get out, because that would make the royal family look bad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was something like that, something real embarrassing.
Yeah, I mean that does make sense because why else would they bother?
Yeah, anybody else they just would have killed, or you'd have done your time openly.
Yeah.
It was something shameful.
Yeah, I mean the fact that they
Yeah.
they not only didn't say who he was, but they also didn't say what he was in prison for.
Yeah.
Like nobody knew what he was in
Yeah,
prison
it was
for.
something nasty, like raping your own sister, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben brings up the Devils of Loudun.
Yeah.
That was what the Devils was based on. Yeah, it was based on a real story. That's a great movie, by the way, if you haven't seen it, if you're into Ken Roth. We reviewed it not too long ago, but yeah, it's based on a real thing. I don't think we ever did a show about that, but we probably should. I think we talked about it when we talked about the movie, but
And based on just everything I've heard in your descriptions of what happened, he was quiet. He was a decent prisoner during the whole time, which tells me he was guilty.
yeah.
He was
I don't know if
guilty.
he was quiet the whole time, but they just said when he, in the first prison he was in, at least they
He
said
was-
that he was like pretty chill, and he wasn't like
Yeah.
he wasn't a pain in the ass like the other prisoners.
Yeah, he
were.
was guilty.
Like he wasn't
guilty,
trying to escape all the time and
He
all
was
that
guilty,
shit.
and he felt lucky to get the punishment that he got.
Yeah, so like I said, maybe it was a mutual agreement where he was
agreed
just
to it.
like,
he's like, okay, yeah.
otherwise we're gonna cut your head off. So.
Yeah, and he goes, okay, and we'll cut your head off, and no one will know.
Right.
You know what I mean? We'll
So you better,
execute
like,
your ass
act
in
right.
private, because they would do that too. They'd execute somebody in private. You know, and there were no formal charges. Just that, well, they knew what he did, and he was part of their family type of deal. It was something like that.
Yeah.
Something fucking real bad.
Yeah.
Something that if you heard what it was, you'd go, oh yeah, well it makes sense. It was something like, he raped his sister or something.
Yeah, it might have been.
Yeah.
I mean, allegedly, we don't know. I mean, it's been a long time. He's dead.
It's gonna be something like that. Because that would be super embarrassing.
Yeah. True.
And he had to be, and you have to punish him.
Yeah.
You can't let that go.
Yeah, because that's fucked up. I mean,
Yeah.
even by the more lax standards of back then,
Of those days, no,
that
they
was
would
still pretty fucked
They
up.
would still fucking say, no, you got to be punished for that.
Yeah.
We can't let you just walk around. Because his sister would have also been part of the royal family.
Yeah.
And somebody's
That's
wife
an
or
affront,
daughter or something
right.
like that. You know what I mean? So you have her family to think of, her father and her mother, or maybe her husband. But she probably wasn't married. She was probably 14, 15, or some shit like that. Because, well, if it gets out she's not a virgin, we can't marry her off to Count of fucking Monte Duku over there in fucking Germany. Because that hymen has to be intact. It's going to be some shit like that.
Yeah, because that was kind of a thing
Yeah,
they were about back
we
then.
are admitting that the hymen is not intact. She's not with us. What do we do now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's going to be some shit like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the more you're talking about it, the more that does kind
Yeah.
of make sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if anyone's really come at it with that exact angle.
They can't get down into the gutter like I can. It's going to be something that was nasty. It's going to be something that was nasty.
Well, like I said, that would explain a lot
Yeah.
because if it was just some run-of-the-mill embezzling or something
Right.
like that, they wouldn't have made a big fucking deal
Nowadays,
about
if
it.
somebody violates a young woman, it's not her fault, and no, you know what I mean. She's not going to be penalized. Back in those days, if a fucking noble or royal woman, a woman in the royal lineage, got violated by her own brother, and she's now not a virgin, you can't marry her off.
Yeah, she's
That's
ruined.
You've now lost a huge investment. That's what they're talking about.
Yeah.
They had to keep that shit quiet. And with the technology they had back then, they could have gone in there and sewn her fucking hymen back up.
Yeah, I wonder if they did that back. They probably did.
did.
They probably did do that.
They probably do that.
Because that was such an important
Yeah.
thing. So it's
Yeah.
like, I'm sure there was some kind of way to be
Could be
like,
something like that. That's what my feelings are
like
telling me.
virgin restoration.
Yeah, they try to restore her as a virgin.
Which is
This
fucked
never
up,
happened.
but-
This never happened, baby.
Yeah.
This never happened. Okay, you're a virgin.
We're just
again.
it's a reset,
We're gonna reset this shit.
which is fucked
Yeah.
up, but they probably did do
It's
that.
probably something like that.
That totally sounds like some
Yeah.
shit they would have done. I mean, it totally does.
That was the first thing that came to my
Because-
mind.
Well, it would not surprise me.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, because they put so much stock in it.
Yeah. And he was
So
going
that
along with
there's
it.
like ways to work around that shit.
Yeah.
Anything that's that important.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like you were saying before, like with the queens producing an heir and
Yeah.
them having to be married to these like old impotent dudes,
Right.
and it's like them being like getting the turkey baster situation
Yeah.
going on. Yeah, they probably did that
Oh, yeah,
because you
I'm
had
sure.
to.
You would have to.
You had to, or you were gonna get your head chopped off, or you were gonna get
You
like
just get
thrown out
passed
in the
over.
cold.
Yeah, you get thrown out in the cold.
Right.
You get retired as a defunct woman.
Yeah, you
And
fucked
live-
up. You didn't have a son.
and we got to take your fortune.
You're
from
defective.
You're going back to your parents. And it was some shit like that. He deflowered somebody probably in his own family, and then that would have fucking ruined her. And now they couldn't marry her off to fucking probably seal some kind of a deal with a foreign fucking government that they already had the shit planned out. Because they planned that shit out when they were 10, 11, 12.
Well, yeah.
So they're like, oh.
Probably
now
when they were babies.
Yeah, yeah. So, you know what I mean? So it was some shit like that. Probably that's what I'm feeling.
Yeah, you just ruined that whole fucking deal.
Ruined the whole thing, and now
asshole.
we can't have the alliance with fucking Daneland or some whatever. You know,
Whatever country Tom
whatever,
just made up.
yeah, it was something like that. It was something political.
Gondwana land.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah. Now we gotta fucking put the cork back in her. You know,
I gotta put the cork back in.
yeah, you know, because they could sew
How hilarious if they had called it that.
Well, they could restore hymens.
I mean, it probably wasn't like super, but you know, it's not like they could get in there and like really check it out to any great degree. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, you could probably fake it, couldn't you?
Yeah, that's what I'm
You
saying.
could fake it, yeah. But they wouldn't want it to be known that that crime happened.
Right.
And that's what I'm thinking. That it was that. So they had to protect that girl. Because he went willingly.
Yeah.
He's not even fighting his incarceration like he's guilty. Yeah, I did it. That's what that, you know, and I'm thinking.
I'm a bad boy.
That dude's dick fucked him up. That's what I'm thinking.
Happens to a lot of dudes.
Yeah, you want all this fucking high-minded shit? He's stealing money and doing all.
Your
No.
dick always sends
That
you
dude
astray.
Put his dick in the wrong thing. Got drunk or something, or just fucking had.
Or maybe he wasn't even drunk. Maybe don't give him an excuse. Maybe he was just an idiot.
He just might have just been seeing this little chick, and he just over and over again. He's like, I gotta get that.
And like I
And
said,
he
he was
probably
just
related to her.
He's like, I don't even care.
Yeah, I don't even care. I don't even care. That's my sister. I don't care. Because a lot of times they weren't raised around their fucking siblings. You know what I mean? There was a lot of half sister type shit going on, and those dudes were those dudes were out of control. A lot of those dudes are out of control, and for all we know, he's fucking 19 or 20, and fucking this girl's fucking 14. He's like, I'm gonna get that.
Well, they were kind of stupid.
Nobody's gonna know.
They were kind of stupid back
Nobody
then.
will know. And then she tells on him.
And then it was all, and then like
Yeah.
you said, it was like all that fucking lead in the water and all that
Yeah.
kind of shit. I'm sure
Yeah.
that didn't help.
Lead in the water.
It made everybody even stupider
Yeah.
and more crazy. So they didn't have the greatest ideas. I'm gonna say like not everybody was stupid back then, obviously, because sometimes you read like some stuff from back then and it sounds like modern, but
Well, he may have done that because other people were doing that kind of shit.
he's just like, well, why not me?
Everybody else is doing it. Yeah, it's probably something like that.
Yeah, it might have been.
Because they were wild.
Yeah, it's true.
Oh, yeah, he fucked his cousin. Shit, fuck him. I'm going to fuck my sister. It was some shit like that.
I mean, it's not that different, right?
Yeah, same shit. I can get away with it. Why?
And demonetized.
I'm gonna tell all my boys about it, man. They're gonna love this.
Woo! High
Yeah,
five,
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever
yeah,
the equivalent of high five was back then.
Probably some shit like that.
I mean, God, people are the worst.
Yeah. Well, that was a party scene.
Well, yeah.
The French
Like I said, they had all the money and all the power. They could do whatever they fucking wanted. They didn't have to work. They didn't have to do anything. They had servants that just did every fucking thing for them.
According to Ben Franklin, they just sat around all fucking day and night, fucking basically drinking, partying, and being witty. Witty and fucking.
Because like I said, they didn't have to do anything
high fashion
for themselves.
That was how politics was done.
They didn't have to work. They didn't even have to like cook for themselves or like clean up after themselves.
It was one party
they didn't have to dress themselves.
They
for
just
Christ's
went from
sake.
one party to the next, to the next, to the next, all fucking day.
They just stood there and like had somebody put wigs on them
Yeah.
and powder the wigs and put the clothes on them and fucking.
And then ride them to some place in a damn carriage.
They didn't have to do a goddamn
Get out
thing.
there and everybody's partying already, you know.
I'm honestly shocked.
Oh, piss boy, yes, bring the piss bucket.
Bring the piss bucket.
You throw the coins in the piss bucket just like a Mel Brooks movie.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. History of the World Part 1. But I haven't seen that in such a long time. I used to love that movie when I was a
Don't
kid.
get saucy with me, Bernays.
That's right, I forgot about that line.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god.
Yeah, they
that's
even
great.
had gays. They'd bring the gays over and they were fucking, oh no, don't do that, oh no. You had a job, fucking, hey, Zach, you'd have loved it. Is Zach in there?
I have not seen Zach tonight.
Haven't seen Zach.
Where is Zach? I mean, unless, I don't think I've seen him in the comments this evening.
But no, they'd have professional gays.
I'm a professional guy.
Yeah, just that would just fucking walk around, decorate shit, and fucking throw the get the parties ready and everything. It probably a blast. But they did this on the backs of fucking starving people.
That's what I mean. It's like, it's one thing to be like, like I said, the parties were probably like fucking epic. I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
But it's just like, it's easy to have an epic party when one, you don't have to do fuck all for yourself. Two, when you have all the money and you can do whatever the fuck you want without getting caught. Like, no one's going to call the cops because someone's smoking weed out on your porch.
You are the cops.
Or you're playing the music too loud or something like that. You are the cops.
Yeah.
And like Tom said, it's like on the backs of millions of starving people in your country, so not so cool. But I don't honestly, I've always been surprised that every single one of the royals, of all of the like European dynasties and stuff like that, didn't weigh like 500 pounds. Because they just went from party to party and they just ate and drank and just like... How could I couldn't live like that. I'd be fucking... And I'd be dead by... I'd been dead by now. Tammy said Zach was here earlier. Oh, it was... Yeah, okay. That's right. But it was a while back, right? I haven't seen him like talking. Because usually he talks a lot in the chat, but I haven't seen him. He must have had to go someplace. Yeah, Ben said it's good to be the king. But it's, man, I kind of want to watch History of the World again now. I haven't seen that since I was a kid. They used to show that on fucking HBO or Cinemax, like all back in the old days. And I saw that a bunch of times. I don't know if it's still funny. Like some of his movies are still funny. Like you know, obviously Young Frankenstein and Blazing Saddles and all that. And I still think Spaceballs is funny. Tom doesn't think Spaceballs is funny. But we haven't seen it in a while. But I still think it's funny. But I haven't seen History of the World in a long time. But that's another one that I need to rewatch. Yeah, Tammy said, yeah, way in the beginning of the show. Yeah, that's right. He did comment a couple times, didn't he? But we're talking about Zach was here like earlier, like at the beginning of the show. Right. And then like he took off. But yeah, so it's getting to be like almost 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
So probably we should wrap it up because
you gotta go into work tomorrow.
Get up early tomorrow.
Yeah.
I thought I was gonna get hurricane day today, but like I said, when I woke up, it was nothing was happening. So I was like, oh well, I guess I gotta go in. But it wasn't too bad. At least we didn't get shit on by the hurricane. But you know, we still have what, September, October. We still have 3 more months of hurricane season. And honestly, the worst hurricanes usually come in September or October. So we still got like that to look forward to. It's pretty bad that we've already had this one this big this early in the season. That doesn't bode well. But we'll see how it goes. Hopefully nothing bad happens. But yeah, so hopefully you guys have enjoyed this. Like I said, I hadn't read anything about this in a long time because this was one of my favorite historical mysteries when I was a kid, when I first read about it. But I hadn't read anything about it in a while. But the more I got into it, like the more interesting I found it. And now I'm kind of like obsessed. I'm like, now I kind of want to figure out who this fucking dude is.
I figured out how to crack it, like I said before.
Well,
find out which one of those, find out which.
Yeah, maybe
which
we should like start looking into that.
Find out which one of the king's relatives disappeared or
I'm gonna
died
fucking
in
solve. I'm
69.
gonna solve this fucking shit. I'm gonna solve
And
it.
fucking, it's probably one of them, and it's not some highfalutin fucking high intrigue fucking embezzlement. No, it's something low, rape.
If I can't figure out who Jack the Ripper is, then maybe I can figure out who this dude is.
Yeah, I'm thinking it's rape.
Because I think there's actually probably more. It's probably more feasible that you could maybe find out who this dude was. Because there are probably like records somewhere of like who this guy was, or like I said, they kind of know roughly where he's buried at. So it's like maybe they could get some DNA.
I think if they'd send him off to prison, they'd probably fucking declare him dead. Whatever family he came from, the family he came from would have declared him dead.
Yeah, we're just like...
So, find out who died in 1669 that was related to
so he went on a boating trip,
and died,
and he never came back.
Because they're hiding the fact that he was incarcerated for life. It was somebody related to the king. And I guarantee you, you'll eventually figure out who it is.
Maybe we should, okay.
Because
We're gonna figure this out. We're gonna figure this out.
Gotta be related to the king. Whoever it was, he disappeared in 69.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll figure
disappeared
it out.
or died. 69.
We'll figure it
Yeah.
out. All right. So I guess we're going to wrap it up because, like I said, I got to go to bed soon. So hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for stopping by and having a conversation in the chat. Thank you for all the super chats. Remember to come back on Friday night at 7:30 Eastern Standard Time for our Sidetrack show, where obviously we're just going to sit around and get drunk and talk about bullshit like we usually do, which is always super fun. But yeah, so thank you everybody for coming by this evening. Hope you have a good day tomorrow, and we'll see you again on Friday night. Good night.